Hello, hello, hello. Almost there. Hello, friends. Welcome to another painting live stream. I'm Christopher, and this is Challenger Tabletop. Let me turn up my painting light. One second. Let's go bright. There we go. It's going to make it a little easier to see what I'm doing for me. Welcome to the channel. This is another painting and hobby discussion live stream where we'll be talking about Warhammer, and today we're continuing Orc Week. Wow! Painting another X-Wing Dakajet. Let's go ahead and take a look at the miniature here. Here you can see the second X-Wing Dakajet that I made for my orcs. This is taking a Revel Miniatures X-Wing 1/57 scale and transforming it into an Orc Dakajet for Warhammer 40k. The pilot I've got inside is a Cromlech Miniatures Orc pilot who just fits inside. And I made this cockpit canopy out of some of the Orc Flyer clear transparent canopies. I actually combined two of them together for that. Welcome, we have a new follower, Terragan29, welcome. Great to have you as a follower, appreciate it. And let's go ahead and switch to our painting camera here. And get right into it. I've got my hot coffee, got my fresh water, got my brushes out, got my paints out. I think we're ready to go. And actually, I think I might, instead of starting with painting, I might start by working on this base a little bit. I've got some super glue here and some coarse red sand that I'm going to use to put some texture on the base. And the reason I want to start with this is because, well, here you can see the cockpit canopy I made. See if we can get that to focus. Here you go, and you can kind of tell I cut two canopies apart and combined them to make that. And it just fits nicely on the over the Orc pilot. But we'll set that aside for now and just quickly try to get some sand on this base. Not going to be doing anything too complex. I'm just basically scattering some super glue around here to make some sort of abstract shapes, and then we're going to stick some sand to it. Going for just kind of a natural look. So hopefully it doesn't look too much like I drew it on with a tube of glue like I'm actually doing. And for a topic today, I thought we could discuss 9th edition Warhammer 40k, the rules of the current edition of Warhammer. It's been out for a while. I've played, let me think, probably at least 30 games or so of Warhammer 9th edition. So, and I've played a ton of other editions going back to all the way to 2nd, I guess. So I do feel like I can give some opinions. And we'll just talk about some of the rules updates, hopefully get some viewer opinions as well. And I would say that although I have a lot of criticisms about 9th edition Warhammer, my opinion of it is overall positive. Like, I love to play the game. Don't think I hate it just because I do have a lot of critiques. But we are coming off of 8th edition, which personally for me was just about my favorite edition of Warhammer. I don't know if you guys were around when, or paying attention to the community when Warhammer 8th edition was announced and coming out, but it really shook things up by simplifying the game a great deal. And a lot of people actually came back to play Warhammer because they heard the game had been greatly simplified. And I personally feel like 8th edition was the best edited version of the game I'd ever played, with the most readable and simplified rules. And one thing that they did, I think, really well in 8th edition is remove arguments from the game. It seemed like they spent a lot of time thinking about which rules caused arguments at the table and made the game difficult or complex to play, and got rid of all those rules. And as a result, they really reduced the number of arguments and debates that would happen at the table. And to put it simply, I would say that a lot of those arguments have come back in 9th edition, or not the same arguments, but we've got new ones. And to sum it up, I would say that the cause of that is the poor editing and writing of the rules. 9th edition rules seem to be written in what I would call legalese, like the kind of writing that you see in like a contract or a licensing agreement that you never ever bother to read because the writing is too hard to decipher. And the sort of explanation for that is that, or at least what I'm always hearing from players of the game if I complain about the editing, is that the rules had to be written in legalese because of tournament play. It's like a way to cater to tournament players by making the writing hyper specific and as complex as it needs to be in order to prevent rules abuses from happening. And kind of the interpretation that these players have is that if the rules are written in a very simple and readable way, then this will create loopholes that players will abuse at tournaments because the writing wasn't specific enough. That's their argument. And I don't buy it. I don't agree. Personally, I feel like 8th edition was the easiest rules to read, and the lack of arguments corresponded to a lack of abuses and loopholes myself. So you see in the rules of 9th edition a lot of like double negatives, for instance, where it will say like this unit gets this bonus unless this thing is not true, you know, stuff like that. And double negatives are avoided by good writers and good editors because they make what's being said harder to understand. And I would counter that for the most part, the rules are not complicated. What they're trying to get across is actually pretty simple. Okay, I'm happy with the base. That's what I was going for, just sort of scattered sand. And I'll come back and paint that base red once the glue is super dry, and then probably after this stream I'll glue some green static grass in little clumps to add some more interest and complexity to the base. So let's go ahead and dive in on this guy. Like yesterday, I'm going to start with a silver dry brush to give this black sort of a chipped and scratched appearance. So I would say that the rules that they're trying to convey are not really that complex, but they seem to think that the best way to convey these simple rules is with very complex language. And I just think that's a mistake. My own writing background is that I taught creative writing to kids at summer camp for about 15 years. So I have some experience editing, just in a sort of a not too official standpoint there, but also a lot of experience writing and reading things that are maybe not that well written. And it looks like I have some dust on this miniature. I'm going to try and blow that off before I start painting it. These guys have been sitting on my desk waiting for paint for about 3 weeks maybe. So I personally feel like one of the best writing philosophies is, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And that applies to writing game rules too. You don't want to write a rule in a complex way if there's a simple way to write it. And I feel like that philosophy was totally missed by the 9th edition rules writers. And I literally said more than once that, I would love to give the 8th edition rules writers a $20 tip for making the rules so much more easy to understand and streamlined and simplified, and getting rid of so many time-wasting processes and arguments at the table. And I have similarly complained about the 9th edition editing multiple times while playing the game, because I'm having to waste time arguing over how rules are specifically supposed to work based on how they're not clearly written or confusingly written in the book. So I have some examples I'll get into in a bit, but that's my sort of overall evaluation of 9th edition, is that the rules are not clearly written and they're poorly edited. That's my opinion. Personal opinion, feel free to disagree. But I'm not trying to say that I don't like 9th edition, or I don't enjoy playing it, or I think the rules are bad. I think the rules are pretty good. And a lot of the changes to the game that we had in 9th edition I think are fine. But specifically regarding the editing and the writing, I feel like they're poorly done, and that whole idea of trying to make the wording complex to avoid loopholes backfired. I don't know if you guys remember when 8th edition Warhammer came out, they released a free rules primer that would basically give you the basic rules for the game that you need to play a simple mission, and they provided a free mission with that. And the rules primer was just about, I think, something like 8 or 12 pages long. And personally, I think that that was some award-winning editing to condense the rules down to such a short format, and to provide it free. I thought was just a great move by Games Workshop. Hope you guys can see what I'm doing here. Try and get it to focus on the X-Wing. So overall, I would say this edition is poorly edited, and the rules are not clearly written. And I complain that they're written in what I would call legalese, meaning basically unreadable sentences that are written for rules lawyers, but at the same time, really legalese is just bad writing. And just as one example, or my first example of bad editing and writing in 9th edition, and the whole problem with writing in legalese would be the heavy cover rule as it was published in the rule book. So the rule book actually went to print with the heavy cover rule miswritten. So basically, heavy cover, what they had in mind, it's very clear to you can see what they thought they were saying, is that units that were in heavy cover during the first round of melee combat would have a +1 bonus to their armor save against the units that came charging in and were attacking them. That makes sense. It's heavy cover. A unit that's defending the heavy cover is going to get some kind of bonus to their defense. But it was written in such a complex way with double negatives, so that what they actually wrote is that the unit gets the cover bonus if they charged. So they wrote that the cover bonus is received unless the attacker charged. And by writing it that way, they're saying that the attacker gets the bonus, and if the attacker charged, the person defending does not get the bonus. So they wrote it exactly the opposite of what they intended, because they were using double negatives and writing in legalese. And so, of course, they had to basically correct this in an errata, and now heavy cover works as intended, where the units that charge do not get the cover, and units that are being charged do get it. But it's just an example how the writing was so bad that even their own editors couldn't understand what they were reading or what they had written. And that's just sort of case in point of why legalese is awful, and you should never write game rules that you have to read 3 or 4 times to understand what they're trying to say. And that's really how it is with 9th edition. Like, even listening to people talk about the rules and read out of the book on YouTube who are trying to explain the rules to new players, they would have to read 2 or 3 times over the same sentences because they were such awkward and convoluted sentences. So a big problem, and could easily have been avoided. And it seems so strange to come off of what was such a easy to read, easy to understand, simplified edition in 8th edition to then such a poorly written and edited 9th. It didn't make sense. It was like they had a whole new writing team with a completely different writing philosophy. And they had forgotten all about this whole keep it simple idea that made 8th so popular and brought so many people back into the game. And I can't quite understand that. All I can think is maybe the 8th edition editor got a new job offer somewhere else, or maybe people didn't like this person for some personal reasons and they were let go. Because it's hard for me to believe that the same people edited 8th and 9th. It just doesn't seem like it from my point of view as a reader. So I've gotten that off my chest. Hopefully I won't have to say too much more about that. I guess I'll go through a couple other examples. One that I ran into the other day had to do with destroyed transport. And as far as I can tell, the destroyed transport rule did not really change going from 8th edition to 9th. Oh, hey, Nick, welcome back. All right. Good to see you, cousin. Nick says he can't stay long, but wanted to say hi. Great to see you. Giving my whole complaint spiel about 9th edition Warhammer rules here. Yeah, again, be kind of a negative topic today a little bit. I do love 9th edition, but I have a lot of complaints about the way it's written. And one example of that is the destroyed transports rule. Now, destroyed transports have been working pretty much the same way for several editions, which is that if you have models riding in a transport and the transport is destroyed, the models have to roll a dice for each individual model, and any ones you get, one of the models riding in the transport dies. So you have 6 models in the transport, you roll 6 dice. If you get 2 ones, 2 of the models riding in the transport died, and the rest pile out. And you get to place them on the table around the transport. Seems pretty straightforward. And then additionally, there's a rule. Cheers, Nick. Additionally, there's a rule called the explodes rule, which not all vehicles have, where you roll a dice when the vehicle is destroyed before any of the models pile out, and usually on a 6 the vehicle explodes and then an extra effect happens. Generally, models around the vehicle will take mortal wounds and some of them will die, and within some certain range of the vehicle, like 3 inches or 6 inches. So you've got those 2 rules, and they don't really interact. Basically, any vehicle where it gets destroyed and there's models riding inside, some of them may die, but only some vehicles explode. And the explodes does not affect the models riding inside. Well, I had played it this way with my friend Mortimer. Basically, we've always played it that way. But he said he had played at a tournament, and someone had argued to him that no, if the vehicle does not explode, the models riding inside don't have to worry about taking any casualties. They can just pile out as normal. So I was like, what? Where do you get this? It's kind of always how it's worked. And so he showed me in the rule book where it was written, and it clearly said that the models inside are not affected by the explodes rule, and instead they have this system where they take casualties as they pile out. But he pointed out that basically both of those rules were written together as one run-on sentence. And you could read it where everything that had to do with models piling out and taking casualties came after what if you roll a 6 for explodes. So he was kind of saying, well, this is all a condition of if it exploded, and it's all one sentence, it's all one rule. And I had to argue with him, no, it's not one rule, because it clearly says that the models piling out are not affected by explodes, and they are affected by this other thing instead. And he was saying, well, yeah, but that's if it explodes. See right here, if it explodes. So basically you had this problem where it looked like the two rules were associated with each other because they were all written as one run-on sentence. So another case of bad editing, and in almost throughout the rule book, these big paragraphs of legalese are followed by bullet points. And the bullet points made it pretty clear when we looked at those that no, the models inside do have to take casualties whether or not the vehicle explodes or has the explodes rule. But the very fact that every rule has to be written twice, once in totally unreadable legalese and then a second time in bullet points, is a sign that the legalese is not suitable to explain the rules. It's too hard to read, it's too hard to understand. That's why they had to include bullet points in every single section to basically interpret the legalese into something that people can read. And I think the better solution is get rid of the unreadable legalese and simply come up with a simple way to say the rule that's easy to understand. And that's basically the job of a good writer, is to figure out how to say things in a way that's easy to understand. And I'm not a fan of whoever it is that they've got writing these very hard to read paragraphs of legalese. So that's my main issue with 9th edition. Now, 8th edition did a pretty good job of simplifying the game, but there's some ways that it still remained very complex. If we look back to before 8th edition, one of the big complaints that players had was keywords. Basically, each model or unit in the game would have its abilities described using these keywords, which were like universal rules that would be shared by many different units in the game. Just as an example, many weapons would have the Melta rule, which basically told you if you're under half range on the weapon, it gets this extra ability. Or I think maybe there was one like Shred. This model can reroll its wound rolls or something like that. So you had these keywords, and each unit would have multiple keywords, sometimes 5 or 6 different keywords. And what that translated to when you're actually trying to learn the rules or look the rules up is that you would get like side quests for everything you tried to look up. So you look up the data sheet of the model you're using, and it has these 5 different keywords. Now you're flipping through the rule book trying to look up 5 different rules for that one data sheet. So at some point someone realized this is not a good system where every rule leads you to 5 other rules, and they thankfully did away with keywords in 8th edition. So that was part of the streamlining and simplifying that happened with 8th, and I applaud it. But unfortunately, in 9th edition, we have seen keywords return to a limited extent in the terrain rules. So they had a nice idea, which is to make terrain highly customizable by giving you these 15 or so different terrain keywords, and then saying, well, forest has the dense keyword and the difficult ground keyword and so on. And then industrial terrain would share the dense keyword but not difficult ground. So in that way you could basically agree with your opponent which keywords each piece of terrain should have, and then you have a huge amount of customizability to create your own terrain and terrain rules that you agree with your opponent. And I think their idea was partly to cut down on the number of terrain definitions they had to give. They could basically define each keyword once and then have a huge variety of terrain that reference those keywords, and as players you wouldn't be limited to how many types of terrain they invented because you could use the keywords to customize your own. So that's kind of the theory with keywords, but it exactly recreated the problem that you had in editions before 8th, where you try to look up a piece of terrain like a forest, and instead of getting the rules of a forest when you look it up, you get a list of keywords, which is like a side quest of different rules that you have to go look up. So in the case of forest, I think it has maybe 5 different keywords, so that's 5 rules you have to go look up in order to actually understand what a forest does. And when you look up a forest in the rule book, it simply references those other rules that you then have to go find. So you're back to this thing of flipping through the pages, trying to look up 3 different rules. And I feel like one of the reasons this is a problem is that those rules are actually sometimes contradicting each other. Not in a hugely important way, but just as an example, when you look up the rules of a forest, it tells you a forest is area terrain. And I don't know why they even really needed to bother defining area terrain, because what area terrain tells you is models only get the benefit of cover if they're standing on the area of this terrain feature. So you think, okay, well that's pretty straightforward. You have to be in the terrain to get the bonus. That's what area terrain means. But then when you look at the dense rule, it says you get the cover bonus from dense terrain if the area of the area terrain is between you and the firer. Now that's my paraphrasing. They actually say the rule in a much more complex and hard to understand way, again using like double negatives. But if you were going to say it simply, it would be that if the firing model is firing across the forest, you get the cover. So this immediately contradicts the area terrain rule, which says you have to be standing on the cover to get the bonus. With dense, you only need to be firing across the cover, and the model does not need to be standing on it to receive the bonus. So why reference players to area terrain, which tells them something that is immediately contradicted by dense? So basically the dense rule and the area terrain rule contradict each other, and that's precisely the kind of problem that you run into when you're using keywords. And instead of simply giving the rules for a forest, you're referencing 5 other rules that people have to go look up. Now those rules have to agree with each other, and in fact they contradict. So I find that to be an annoying side effect of the return of keywords, which I hope they will do away with in the next edition, and just give us definitions of 7 or 8 types of terrain, however many you want. I don't really remember players clamoring for more terrain types or more terrain customization, so I'm not really sure why they felt like that was a necessary addition to the game. if they really only gave us ruins and forests and maybe walls or barricades, I think that would be enough for people. And whatever terrain they give us, we'll make do with that. And if people want to come up with custom terrain rules, nothing was stopping them in the first place. But now we have a system for it. Okay. It's pretty rare that me and my opponent have a piece of terrain that we feel the need to discuss its rules. For the most part, the 12 or so terrain types that are in the rule book are just fine. And I'm really could take it or leave it with the customizable terrain. But yeah, another feature of 9th edition. Not bad, but I don't really think it added much. And I do think that the terrain keywords were unnecessary and an unnecessary amount of complication. And just a few more things about the terrain keywords that I notice that I find to be not well edited or written. Take, for instance, forests. Forests have the dense keyword, and dense... Does 40k employ percentage rolls, Nick asks? Maybe casualties in this instance could be a percentage roll of the explosion? They really don't. Pretty much everything is on a 6-sided dice. And for the Math Hammer fans, I think 1 in 6 chance is like 18 point something %. So it really doesn't lend itself to easily figuring out the percentages. But it doesn't stop people from doing the math and figuring stuff out, like exactly what are the % chance of this unit doing this amount of damage to this target. And people have actually made computer programs and websites that do all those calculations for you, where you just plug in all the variables. Kind of interesting. But in the case of forests, or the dense rule actually has a caveat that says, if this terrain piece is at least 3 inches high, here's what it does. But it doesn't say anything about what if it's not 3 inches high. So say you have a forest that's got shrubbery and bushes, and it's all like just under 3 inches high. According to the rules, dense doesn't kick in or do anything. And as a result, you have no way to get any cover bonus at all from that terrain piece. So bushes that are just about 3 inches high are actually taller than almost all the infantry in the game. So you end up with infantry in like a patch of bushes that are tall enough to literally conceal them, but provide no in-game cover or bonus at all. And I think that people might have caught that in the rules and provided some rules for a clump of bushes like that. But when the rules are written in such a complex way and they're so hard to read and understand, I think stuff's also more likely to kind of slip through the cracks like that. So I found that kind of to be like a ridiculous kind of oversight, that forest made of bushes that are not 3 inches high gives no cover at all. Doesn't make sense. And I think it kind of fits in the category of bad editing. So those are some examples. But overall, I feel like 9th edition is fun. The terrain is fun. I don't really dislike having the ability to make custom terrain, but I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it really adds much to the game. Certainly compared to 8th edition, I wouldn't miss it if it went away. And another example of this kind of rules that are not on the data sheet or not all written in one place would be stratagems. And I think that a lot of people who have critiqued 8th and 9th edition Warhammer have complained about stratagems because basically there's so many of them. Basically every codex has about 3 to 4 pages of stratagems, and then you'll have campaign books coming out that have extra stratagems that they add on top of those, or faction supplements, that kind of thing. Like my Dark Angels have probably 3 or 4 pages of stratagems in the Space Marine Codex, and then they have other stratagems that are in the Dark Angels supplement. So there you're looking at probably 6 pages of stratagems spread between 2 books. And then if any stratagems come out in a campaign supplement, then you've got a 3rd book to worry about. So I do feel like that's a lot of places to look for rules. And the real problem comes in the fact that you kind of need to know the stratagems of every army, because you need to know what abilities your opponent's models have in order to play against them and counter them. And so that really means you don't just need to know the 4 to 6 pages of stratagems you have available, but the ones your opponent has too. And since most players play against a whole variety of opposing factions, you kind of need to know all the stratagems for every army. And that's just a ridiculous amount of information to expect players, especially new players, to be able to handle. All right, see you, Nick. Looks like Nick's got to go, but that's all right. See you next time. All right, well, I think we got the base coat done on this sort of brass. I'm using Balthazar gold base paint for that. And what do we want to do next? Oh, maybe we should work on the pilot. Then we might come back and add an ink wash to the rest of the plane. So, stratagems. I think one good solution for simplifying stratagems that I've seen is to simply put the stratagems on the data sheet of the units that can use them. Because what they've currently done is that each unit has, again, keywords, and the stratagems have keywords. So you have to basically figure out what all the keywords you have in your army, and then read through all the stratagems to look for those same keywords on the stratagems, and then connect them in your head that this unit can use this stratagem, and so on. And same thing with your opponent's army. So not only do you need to know that your opponent has a smoke screen stratagem where they can throw a smoke grenade to make their unit harder to hit, you have to know which of their models has the smoke screen keyword to be able to know which models can use that stratagem. So again, this is a huge amount of, I would say, unnecessary complexity, where you could simply put the smoke screen ability on the model's datasheet, and then you just have to know what the rules of the opponent's units that they chose are. Now, I don't know if that's really so much simpler. Maybe then you'd be saying, well, now I have to know what every single unit in my opponent's army has as abilities. But that's more the way that I think players assimilate information. When a new unit comes out, players will tend to learn everything that it can do, but it's hard to remember if it has access to 12 or 13 different stratagems. That's a lot of information. And I don't think it's even necessarily good game design. I think it's kind of a flaw with stratagems that some units have access to 15 or 20 and other units have access to 1 or 2. If you were putting those abilities on their data sheet, it would be more clear to the game designers when they're loading a unit up with too many abilities or not giving enough interesting abilities to another unit. And I get that maybe they don't want to have to reprint the same rules for the same ability on two different units that can both use it. That leads to thicker books and bigger data sheets, so I can kind of see why they went this route. But I think it does kind of fall into the trap of using keywords and having to look too many places for the abilities of one unit. So that's an issue I see. Let's see. Okay, we put some green on the pilot, and I was seeing some of what I painted green on the last guy are probably actually teeth. So I tried to leave those black. We'll come in and hit those in a second. But I want to go ahead and wet blend a highlight onto this guy. I'm going to use a Lauren Forest green to highlight my orc flesh here. And just basically trying to get it in the spot that would be hit by the light. There we go. So stratagems are a ton of information for new players to learn. They're hard for players to remember. Sometimes you forget to use a stratagem for your own army just because, again, the unit that in question has access to so many different stratagems, it's hard to keep them in mind. And the stratagems also have a huge variety of when they get invoked. You have stratagems that you activate at the top of the phase, so like beginning of enemy shooting phase, you have to remember to declare you're using the stratagem. You have stratagems that are activated when the enemy targets your unit with an attack in that shooting phase. So you have to remember then to interrupt your opponent who's saying they're going to shoot at your unit to say, wait, I want to use this stratagem. And it's not exactly clear that there's supposed to be a pause in the play for you to think about whether or not there's a stratagem for you to use. You have to basically have it memorized and in the front of your mind and be ready to interrupt your opponent with it usually. Unless you have a very kind opponent who knows your army rules and stops the action to ask if you want to use your stratagem. Transhuman physiology is a classic example of that. All right, should I go ahead and paint the teeth on this little guy? I think let's do some silver on his little controls and joysticks he's got there. But stratagems were also a thing, you know, they had the same issue in 8th edition, so it's not like they got any worse in 9th. Just one of the pervasive complexity issues that we have in Warhammer to worry about. There we go. One thing that does need to go away, in my opinion, is armies of renown. So back in, I think, 7th edition and before, or maybe it was just in 7th, I don't know, we had something called specialist detachments. And specialist detachments would spell out exactly a list of units and then say, if you bring exactly these units, you get these extra rules. And I think a lot of people were glad when those went away. The whole point of them, in my opinion, seemed to be to sort of promote people buying a whole list of certain units for the benefit of Games Workshop. Like, you know, they want to sell more infantry and more kits, so they say, well, if you bring, you know, 10 tactical squads in your army, then you get this new special rule. So then you have people going out and buying 10 kits of tactical marines in order to create this specialist detachment and benefit from the rules. So it seemed like kind of a sales tactic or something. But now we have those back. I don't know if they were still existing in 8th edition or if they're new in 9th, in the form of armies of renown, which to me just sounds like a new name for specialist detachments, which I was glad to see go. And armies of renown will again give you a list of certain units that can benefit, and they have theoretically a drawback of some kind, like you're not allowed to bring X unit, but you can bring Y and Z. And just like specialist detachments, you bring your Army of Renown and you get some free special rules. Well, not free, you have to pay some command points. And command points have started to become, in some of the new rules that they're writing, almost interchangeable with the points that you have for your army. So it used to be you bring two armies that are both 2,000 points. Those are supposed to be balanced against each other. They're supposed to have equivalent power, although they may be tailored for different specialties. But now we have things where, in addition to the points you pay for your army, players are also able to get certain advantages and benefits from paying command points before the battle. And command points had been basically only for stratagems and like in-game abilities during the battle, more or less your spells that you get to trigger as a commander. But now we have a lot of stratagems that are used before the battle that affect the power of your units and your army. And a classic one in Space Marines is that you have basically you can spend command points to improve the power of your characters, make your apothecary like a chief apothecary, and they get these extra abilities, but they don't pay any extra points for them. Instead, they pay command points. And we're now seeing some stratagems or abilities previewed for Genestealer cults in one of the upcoming campaign books, where you're literally cutting the points of your army in exchange for like essentially free stratagems. So they seem to be roughly on par with cutting 100 points out of your army in order to get what's essentially a 1 command point or 2 command point stratagem. And so they're continuing to sort of blend and confuse point values and the spending of command points. And this is really evident with Armies of Renown, where you're paying sometimes like 1 or 2 command points, and you're getting a huge amount of extra abilities and rules for your army without paying any more points. And in some cases it kind of seems like they're trying to use this to balance units that they don't feel are well balanced by creating an Army of Renown that gives them these extra abilities for the cost of command points. And I feel like it's bad rules writing. It's making the rules more confused, and it's making the point values of armies less relevant to their balance. So those are kind of my issues with that. So I would like to see abilities that affect the power of your army and what rules you have available to you cost points, never command points, if that makes sense. That's my personal opinion of what I'd like to see. And I would love to see Armies of Renown totally go away. Just as an example, the hot new Army of Renown, which all the players are talking about, is Crusher Stampede for Tyranids. And the penalty you have to pay to get a Crusher Stampede is you're not allowed to bring any units that have 1 wound. You're not allowed to bring any swarms. You can basically only bring monsters and Tyranid warriors. And then you pay some command points, and then you get a whole bunch of special rules and new stratagems for your army. And one of the problems I have with this is that I don't think that that's really much of a disadvantage to have to give up 1 wound models and swarms. When I play against an army that has nothing but vehicles or monsters, it means that there's nothing for my anti-infantry weapons to be effective against. So say that half of my army is equipped with anti-infantry weapons like bolt guns and flamers and other weapons that are, say, below strength 7. Then essentially those weapons are all now useless in my army against someone who's only brought monsters or only brought vehicles. And whether or not I have the ability to remove any of their models really comes down to how many anti-tank, anti-vehicle weapons do I have in my army. So this idea of not bringing any one wound models or swarms is really actually already a good strategy. And I would not describe it as much of a penalty for the Crusher Stampede army. It's more like forcing a player to do something that already helps them. And then the rules that they get for having Crusher Stampede, where all the monsters in their army get a 5-up invulnerable save in exchange for spending 1 or 2 command points. And additionally, every monster in the army gets -1 to all damage it takes. So say you have a bunch of damage 2 weapons that you're trying to use against this Crusher Stampede army. They're only going to be doing 1 damage each to their monsters now instead of 2. And -1 damage, in my opinion, is one of the most powerful rules you could get in Warhammer 40k on a data sheet. And the fact that it's being applied not just to one, but to every monster in the army for 0 points is a significant balance issue. If you were having to add that ability to the data sheet of the monsters, you might expect to see their points value go up about 100 points each, or maybe 50 points each. And so the idea that you're getting all those abilities and not having to pay any points for them is going to unbalance a Crusher Stampede army against an army that, say, just has a few monsters mixed in. The Crusher Stampede army, in my opinion, is going to be much, much stronger. And when you look at all the stratagems that they add on top of that, I think it's really out of control. And I get the impression that the reason they did this is that they felt like these Tyranid monsters were underpowered. You weren't getting enough for the points that they cost. But this is the absolute wrong way to fix that, because for any player who isn't using the Army of Renown, the problem you were trying to fix is still there. So basically, I think Armies of Renown is the wrong way to go about fixing data sheets that you think are over or underpowered. And I would love to see them removed from the game and instead simply give us data sheets that are as well balanced as you can make them. Now, there is an issue that we've had kind of plaguing us for a long time in Warhammer 40k, which is that the attempts to keep the game balanced generally come in the form of errata every few months. And as a player, you're expected to go online and look up the most recent errata, or in fact, every single errata ever, and compare them to your rule books to basically keep yourself current on all the changes to the rules. And this includes changes to point values. But what they do not provide us with is like a free website where you can simply go and see a list of every model and their current points values. So they want you to have to buy the codex to get the point values, and they want you to have to go online and track down the errata, download them, read the PDF, and figure out where the rulebook is no longer accurate. So that's been pretty annoying to a lot of players for a long time. And we've seen a website come out of Russia called Warhammer that simply catalogs all the current rules and provides one website where you can look up all the data sheets, and they include the changes to the point values automatically. And of course this would be easy for Games Workshop to do, but it goes against their business plan of having to sell these codexes to the players. So I find that annoying, that basically they're using an outdated system to disseminate the changes to the rules when an easier, more obvious system clearly exists, but they refuse to use it, which is simply a free website with the updated points values or updated data sheets, however you would do it. And instead we have Games Workshop trying to push this Warhammer app on us that's supposed to do essentially this. And rather than make it free, they want to make it a pay service where you're paying $5 a month or whatever for this app. And clearly this is because they feel like it's going to replace buying codexes, and they want to replace that income with app subscriptions. Now, I can understand why they want to do that, but it's not in the best interest of the players, and it's not the simplest and most elegant solution. So they call that Warhammer Plus, and I feel like they are trying to figure out how to force everybody to use Warhammer Plus, and I'm not a fan of that either. Trying to force players to use a cell phone app, I think, is a mistake, and I think it's annoying. And many players already use Battlescribe, which is a free app made by a third-party company, kind of like Wahapedia. And here you have a third-party company that's able to provide a Warhammer-type app for free, and yet Games Workshop, with all their revenue from miniatures and codex and everything else, box game sales, can't come up with a free app themselves. And when they come up with a pay app, it's usually full of bugs and of inferior quality to these other apps that are coming out for free. So that's kind of annoying and perplexing, and certainly I can understand how Games Workshop would be annoyed at these other companies and feels like nobody should be giving away Games Workshop intellectual property for free, but they're not really doing their part as far as everything they could to make the game easy for the players and to create value for the players. As you might expect, they seem more focused on how to create revenue for themselves, more so than the quality of the player experience, and often at the expense of the player experience. If you just compare the idea of downloading a free app or going to a free website versus having to sign up for a subscription service paid on your credit card and available on your mobile phone, I would much rather have a free service any day of the week. And signing up for a subscription service is really awful. I don't, when you're trying to pay off debts, you don't want to have to be signing up for new subscription services. It feels like someone's got their hand in your pocket, draining your bank account month after month, which is different than even just buying a codex for $35 or $40 that then you own and can sit on your shelf. So I am glad that they update their points values. I'm glad that they provide those erratas for free, but I'm dismayed at what I feel is attempt coming to try to force everybody to adopt a subscription service. And for that reason, I'm not a fan of Warhammer Plus, and I kind of hope it goes away or becomes a totally free app. And they seem to not really understand how creating a free app could actually help draw more players into the game and make their game more popular. Am I wrong? Is Warhammer Plus available for free? I'm not sure. Leave a comment if you have a favorable opinion of it or you pay for it and you love it. Well, I think I've got white pretty well blocked in on a lot of these wings here. I just remembered I wanted to do kind of white flames kind of thing on these wings. Maybe I can still do that. Maybe I'll go ahead and start blocking that in fact. Kind of fun to do some freehand, some orky freehand, but I guess I do want to be kind of precise with this. I think I have another white as well. This one's a little more full. So what would I like to see in the future of, say, 10th edition? Based on what I've already gone over, I'd like to see Armies of Renown go away, never to return. I would like to see keywords go away, including probably unit keywords. And I would like to see stratagems become abilities on the unit datasheet. I would like to see datasheets and rules available online for free, so that when they get updated, there's just one place you have to look for all the current rules and points values. There we go. Kind of going for like lightning flames, I guess. Kind of what I'm thinking. Or kind of like white lightning bolts. Kind of look like flames. Probably gonna have to do a couple of coats of this. White is not the best covering color. Sorry for the somewhat negative tone on this episode. Of course, critiquing is often going to sound very negative, as you're definitely thinking about what is it that you don't like or could be improved. So I feel like I just need to reiterate every once in a while, I do love Warhammer. I do like playing 9th edition. I do think the rules are good. Just giving my opinion of ways I think they could be improved. Yeah, I like how this is looking. I saw this done on an orc flyer on Instagram, I think, or was it Facebook? I'm not exactly sure. And I said, left a comment saying, hey, that looks awesome. Do you mind if I steal that idea for my X-Wing Dakajet? And the guy said, hey, go ahead. Of course, I think he actually did it better than I'm doing. But that's okay. A lot of times when you copy someone else's idea, you don't actually do it quite as well as they did either. All right, getting the second coat of white here. Then I guess I'll come along with black after this and start touching up these areas from the reverse angle. So yes, I think keywords should go away on terrain as well. Simply give us, 10 or 13 different types of terrain and explain the rules for each one in a very simple and easy to understand way. That's all that's needed. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment. What rules changes do you think would be needed for 9th edition? And give the video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't. But very curious to hear other people's opinions of 9th edition versus 8th, and do you think 9th is poorly written in terms of the readability of the rules? Or do you think that legalese, these sort of highly complex sentences that try to account for every situation, is what's needed? I've had a few people on Facebook say, well, hey, that's how it has to be for tournament players. And I was on, I think, Angerous Angel's stream on Twitch earlier today and talking to him about it a little bit. And he said he thinks that Games Workshop is making a real effort to cater to the tournament community. He said he thinks that's where they get most of their money. And I could kind of see that. A lot of people have to buy a lot of models to go to the Las Vegas Open and these other big tournaments. And it would make sense if that's where a lot of the enthusiasm for Warhammer is strongest. I remember when I would hang out at the old hobby shop in my hometown, I would always be seeing people working on Warhammer Fantasy armies for an upcoming tournament. But then a lot of those people were basically kicked out of the hobby when Warhammer Fantasy was discontinued, so hard for me to think that they're really the core that Games Workshop is trying to cater to, but maybe that's changed. Alright, well there you can kind of see some flames starting to happen on the wings. I'm trying to decide if those flames are like big and cool enough. I think maybe I want them to go further back as they get closer to the engine. So the flames are kind of smaller where the wing gets smaller and bigger where the wing gets bigger. Kind of like that. And let's make this one bigger too. And do we have some tournament players here? My buddy Mortimer has been going to a lot of tournaments and really having fun. And I have felt a little bit encouraged to try one out from hearing his experiences. Although, I don't know if I would be good at playing on a timer, as that does seem to be more of a thing nowadays with tournament play. And I don't feel like I would be going to a tournament necessarily just trying to win. I think I would just be basically trying to have some good games and have a good time. And I don't know, are tournaments a good place for people like that? I would think so. One of the things I think would be cool is a way to like meet a lot of new players in a short amount of time and get to play games against several people, so you might make some new friends who turn into regular opponents, or you end up inviting over for a game. And of course you're going to have some players who maybe are not super good sports or don't seem very fun to play against, and you can at least figure that out by playing against them at a tournament. Figure out if you don't want to invite them over. Alright, there we go. Okay, flames are looking a little bigger now as they get closer to the engine. I like that. Well, gonna start on the flames on the other side. Get a little more white paint. I do feel like, maybe with the exception of Armies of Renown, the actual balance of armies in 40k is pretty good right now. But this is more like my at-home experience since 8th edition. So, thinking about 8th and 9th edition games, I felt like most of the games I played at home have been pretty balanced. And usually I haven't felt like there was no way to win, and that it usually comes down to my tactical decisions and the luck of the dice. But I understand that at the top tournament levels, the balance between the factions is not totally even. And I've heard that Tau and Necron players are really struggling in the tournament scene. And I do think that sometimes there's a difference in balance between sort of the tournament level and the more casual or beginner players at home. Just taking Tau, for instance, it's my personal impression that Tau are kind of an easy faction to synergize. Like if you're trying to make a strong shooting army, it's pretty obvious how to combine units and their abilities in order to improve the power of your shooting. And basically any player can make a pretty solid shooting Tau army without a lot of experience. And pretty much all you have to do is don't use any Kroot, don't use any Vespids, and throw in some railguns, some missile systems, some plasma, some marker lights, and then tons of shield drones. Probably 2 Riptides, and you're good. You've got a really solid army that can shoot a lot of other armies off the table. And I think a lot of Tau armies are able to remove like 3 enemy units per turn with the power of their shooting. And their weakness of not being very strong in hand-to-hand combat is kind of hard for new players to take advantage of. I mean, because sure, you go charging at the Tau with your whole army, and they're probably sitting back in their home side of the board for the first part of the game. And as you approach them, they're shooting your units off the table, probably 3 units a turn, until you get into combat with them, at which point you're probably only charging in with maybe 2 units, 3 if you're lucky. And then it's up to basically did enough stuff survive to make it into combat. And on the Tau turn, they're probably going to fall back and just shoot you again and wipe out, 2 or 3 more of your units. So I find that against Tau, I do tend to have my army get wiped off the table. Usually I'm playing with kind of like a army that does some assault, some shooting, or else I'm playing with an all-shooting type army, in which case I do tend to get outgunned by the Tau. But at the tournament level, I feel like the players are better at countering the shooting power of the Tau, and players are better at playing melee-type armies than I am. And so Tau are not as good in the tournament scene, but maybe they're better and easier for casual players or beginners. Let me know if you agree, or if you think Tau are super easy to counter with melee. But I haven't really had a lot of experience playing against them in 9th edition. So most of my experience with Tau is from 8th edition and before, where I found they were very good. But maybe 9th has sort of rebalanced that. I've heard that it has. I guess another thing I wanted to talk about with regard to 9th edition is secondary objectives. And I think these were new in 9th. I'm trying to remember if we had secondaries in 8th. I don't think so. So secondary objectives give you a list of objectives that you can do during the battle, kind of like missions for your army that give you victory points toward winning the game. And in addition, each mission has a primary objective that both players have, but the secondaries players get to choose which ones they want to take. And I do think that secondaries added a lot of complexity to the game, because now, before the game, you have to choose 3 secondaries, and you have to pick from, I don't know, about 20 of them. And then each mission has its own secondary you could pick. So you really can't choose your secondaries for sure until you know what the mission is going to be. Otherwise, I know some players do try to pick their secondaries in advance while they're building their army and build their army around their secondaries, which is a good tactic. But secondaries have definitely added complexity to the game, which 8th edition tried to remove a lot of complexity, and then I think they were trying to selectively add some back in 9th edition. And secondary objectives are one of the ways that they chose to do that. And personally, I do like secondaries. I think that they add some fun complexity to the game and let you kind of customize what you want to be doing with your army. But I also feel like a lot of the secondaries are not very playable. So you have players mostly in agreement as to which are the most achievable secondaries, and those tend to be the only ones that get picked. Just as an example, retrieve Octarius data, I think, was being chosen by almost every player, as basically it requires you to do an action in all 4 quarters of the table, and then you get points for that. And the actions could be completed by a unit coming in from reserve and would be finished on the same turn, so it was very easy to pull off. And you had other ones that basically were almost never chosen. Like, for instance, almost all of the ones that require you to complete an action with a unit, where the action doesn't complete until the next turn's command phase, so your opponent has a chance to destroy the unit before the action's completed on their turn and deny you those points. I think most players agree those are very hard to do, because it relies on your opponent basically letting you do them and knowing that you're going to get victory points for it. So I suppose my main criticism of the secondaries is that they're not well balanced. Another thing about the secondaries is that if you add up your possible points from your secondaries, your primary, and your extra 10 points for having your army painted, which I think is a fun little rule, you get 100 points possible. But this assumes that each secondary can give you 15 points. And in terms of, I would say, also kind of related to bad writing and editing in 9th edition, most of the secondaries can't give you 15 points. So if you want to have a possible score of 100, which is kind of a nice fun round number to aim for, and it's kind of implied that it's the maximum score for each game possible, then you actually have kind of a limited selection of secondaries to choose from that even have 15 points possible. And I think there's no reason to have done this. Clearly what they're going for is that you have to kind of balance and weigh whether you want to go for a secondary that could score 15, but it's very hard, or a secondary that can only score like 10 or 8 or 6, but is easier to pull off. But I don't think that kind of choice was necessary, because they could have simply had conditions that were harder to achieve for you to get 15 points from each secondary. So just as one example, let's take Slay the Warlord. Slay the Warlord gives you the condition of destroying the enemy warlord unit during the game, and you only get 6 points for doing this. And there's no way to get 15 points from that secondary. So yes, it's a very simple secondary with just one condition, slay the enemy warlord. And essentially as a penalty for having such a simple condition, you have a limited number of points that you can get from it, just 6 points. Now here's like a different way that secondary could be worded that would allow you to get 15 points or 6 from it. If you slay the enemy warlord, you get 6 points. But if the unit that slays the enemy warlord is your warlord, you get 3 extra points. So now you can get 9 points if your warlord slays the enemy warlord, which is fun and exciting and requires you to take a greater risk by putting your own warlord in danger. And then and that would get you 9 points then, and add one further level to get it to 15, where you get 6 extra points if after your warlord kills the enemy warlord, they then survive the battle. So now you've made a way that the same secondary can give you 6, 9, or 15 points, depending on whether you did something fairly easy or very difficult. And there's nothing stopping them from having written all the secondaries that way, where every single one could give you up to 15 points. And that would mean that no matter which secondaries you picked, every player would have a possible score of 100 points in every game possible. And personally, I think that would have made a lot more sense. I think it would be a lot more fun. That way, when someone gets 85 points by the end of the game, instead of having to wonder, well, how much could they have gotten? Is 85 their... Did they do everything perfect and got 85 points, or could they have gotten 100? Instead, we would just know that there was always 100 possible. And if someone got 85 points, they missed out on getting 15 points from one of their secondaries, or they didn't paint their army, or they didn't max out primary. So that is, I think, a missed opportunity, and a case where a little more complexity of having written more conditions for each secondary could have made the scoring a little more simple, because it would always be out of 100 instead of having one player trying to score 85 and the other player trying to score 90 points because of which secondaries they picked. And I just think it would be a lot more fun if everyone was always trying to score 100 points instead of having these weird random point totals that you're going for. Here on these bottom wings, there's some kind of cutouts where there's like recessed panels, and so I'm basically just not painting flames in those recesses and figuring it'll still look okay. Usually when you see the model, you'll kind of see it from above, but I guess you can kind of see what I'm talking about there. Well, how do you like these kind of lightning flames? Is it a good look? I thought it looked fun and like it wouldn't be too hard to copy this effect, but the other guy did, who inspired me to do this, I think made them look better. Maybe his freehand was better, maybe his paint consistency was a little better, but I will come across these and do a second coat in a bit. Let's see, what else would I like to see change in 10th edition? I think we're getting to most of the stuff that I would like adjusted. I have to say I wouldn't mind if -1 damage went away. Subtracting 1 from all damage on a unit is an incredibly powerful ability, but I kind of feel like it could be more simply represented by just giving models more wounds, because basically that's what it equates to in the game, except it sort of unfairly punishes 2-wound weapons and gives a big boost to weapons that do like +3 damage, you know, like Dark Lance for Dark Eldar does like D6 +3, I think, or D3 +3, making it kind of counteract the -1 damage ability. And I don't feel like that's really necessary. I guess I'll just mention a couple issues, or one issue that Warhammer has kind of suffered from in the past is what's known as power creep, which is the tendency to have each new faction that gets a rule book or each new rule that gets written being stronger than the ones that preceded it. And I feel like we had an example of that this week with the announcement or the preview of what the new Tau Hammerhead railgun was going to be like. And its weapon on the Tau battle tank and its damage characteristic is going to be a D6 damage, if I remember right, +6. So we've been kind of already amazed by these weapons that do like D6 +3 damage. Now we're going to have D6 +6 damage. And then furthermore, anything it hits is going to take, I think, 3 mortal wounds. And then further, the weapon is going to automatically bypass invulnerable saves, which are sort of generally meant to be saves that are so good that they work against anything. So what a huge amount of rules, both bypassing invulnerable saves, adding mortal wounds on top of the damage it deals, and simply adding 6 to whatever number you roll. It means that the railgun is going to be doing a minimum of like 10 damage to anything it hits, with no invulnerable save allowed and -6 to whatever armor save. So basically no save. And I think this is going to be pretty brutal on the table. Just for instance, you'll have 3 Tau Hammerheads shooting at, say, your Orc Stompa, assuming that they're able to re-roll their hit rolls and wound rolls or add bonuses to hit with marker lights. You're probably going to have all 3 railguns hitting and wounding your Stompa. No save, no invulnerable save allowed, so 10 damage going through more or less automatically from each tank, so 30 damage destroying your Stompa. Does it have 40 wounds or 30? Can't remember off the top of my head, but basically you're going to have 3 tanks that cost 140 points each, removing a model that costs 600. So I think they're going to really punch above their weight and be ultra efficient and easy to use. So I really see them kind of unbalancing the game in a big way. But maybe that's what Tau need. Everybody's saying Tau are in a bad spot right now. They need a big boost, so it's hard to judge one rule out of context of the rest of the game and the rest of the codex. But to me, it sounds like the Tau are going to be incredibly powerful and not really balanced against the other powerful weapons in the game. For instance, the Space Marine las cannon doing a D6 damage is often going to be doing 1 to 3 damage total, compared to a weapon that does 10 damage minimum, it's really night and day. And okay, maybe the two are not supposed to be, you know, equal. Maybe a Tau railgun is supposed to be much more powerful than a las cannon. But kind of the way it feels as a player is just that, well, the Tau rules are newer, so we're going to make them the most powerful thing you've ever seen in order to make people want to play Tau or buy a Tau codex or buy these tanks. And then next time a Space Marine book comes out, we're going to give las cannons d6 damage plus 6 and some other ability. So it kind of seems like they're just keep making each new codex, you know, more powerful. That's the meaning of power creep. And I think that we've seen that a bit in this last week or two with the combination of Crusher Stampede and the new Tau railgun. And I think that power creep is bad for the game because basically it's making each codex get weaker and weaker and weaker as new ones come out by comparison, rather than keeping everything balanced against each other. But we'll see. I guess I feel like, you know, with the right points values, power creep is not a problem because you can simply make the new, more powerful data sheets cost more points. I just don't necessarily see that happening with this minimum 10 damage railgun on a 140 point model. Kind of seems like power creep to me. The other the other well-known creep to Warhammer players is scale creep, where the models keep getting bigger and bigger, specifically infantry. If you look back at the Space Marines from the 1980s, they're like half the size of the new Primaris Marines, but that was kind of intentional. Primaris Marines, in my opinion, are meant to fix the scale problems of Warhammer, where, according to the lore, Space Marines are gigantic, 7 or 8 feet tall, but then when you look at the models, they were about the same size as regular human infantry. And that was kind of fixed with the release of Primaris, who are much bigger than the other human infantry. But it's kind of becoming a problem again, as now when we get Inquisitors and Sisters of Battle released, they're almost as big as Primaris Marines. So kind of seems like they missed the memo that everything that's not a Space Marine is supposed to stay small by relative size. But, well. Let's get some white paint on the nose of this one. Did that on the other one, and I think it looked pretty good. I could also paint some flames coming off the nose. Might look good. Haven't decided yet if I want to do that. Just getting a base coat on here. We'll go over it again to get the coverage a little better. And then we'll hit it with a little bit of an ink wash, Seraphim Sepia probably. So I would like to see secondary objectives stick around. They did add complexity, but I feel like it was a good kind of complexity. And I would like to see secondary objectives removed from the missions, where you can pick all your secondaries in advance when you're making your army list, and you don't have to wait until the mission has been decided to see all your choices for what secondaries you want to choose. And I would like to see all the secondaries balanced against each other so that each one has a maximum possible score of 15 points. I think that would be good for game balance. Alright, have we gotten all the armor panels painted white? I was planning to paint checkerboard on all the armor panels, but I think I might change that on the wing ones. The ones that have flames on them, I think are not going to be have checkerboard. So I think the color I'm going to go to next is going to be black, and we're going to help define the flames by painting black around them. Or should I do a second coat on the white first? I think that'd probably be a good idea. So going to my white paint that was a little more full. And we're just going to do a quick second coat on all the white freehand flames. And then we'll come back with black and help correct and fix the freehand a little bit. The keywords for terrain I don't think are the worst. I wouldn't be hugely disappointed if they kept keyword terrain in the next edition, but I would like to see some of it get tweaked. Like, they could just remove the requirement for forests to be 3 inches high, and I feel like that would just be a straight up improvement. Like, you know, why did forests that are 2.5 inches high not provide any protection at all? And I feel like there might be some other little loopholes right now where, like, you can see an aircraft that's behind a ruin, but that aircraft can't see you. That seems a little weird. I think that's how it works right now. Currently, you cannot see through ruins, and that means that you can hide units behind them and they cannot be shot except by stuff that doesn't require line of sight. And players seem to really like that, as it reduces the alpha strike of turn 1, where whoever gets first turn can decimate the enemy army before they have a chance to do anything, and turn basically a 2,000 point game into a 2,000 versus 1,500 before the player who goes second has a chance to take their turn. And the ability to hide models behind ruins, or even hide your entire army behind ruins on turn 1, has kind of flipped that around, where the player who goes second often has that advantage. And that's probably a good thing. You know, having your army suffer a huge alpha strike on turn 1 that cuts you down to 1,500 or 1,200 points from 2,000 was kind of a feel-bad moment that didn't feel very fair or realistic, as it was kind of an artifact of the fact that the game is one where one player takes their turn and activates all their models, and then the other person gets to take their turn and activate all their models. Whereas in real life, combat is simultaneous between two armies. So that's obscuring terrain, I think, has been good for the game. And placing a bunch of obscuring terrain in the middle of the board has become almost a universal terrain setup philosophy among 40k players in my experience. I have my table set up for a game tonight, and I made sure to do that. One thing we have had in 9th edition that I want to highlight is the addition of special game modes for playing 500 and 1,000 point games, and even for above 2,000 points. And I think that's been quite cool. Having missions that are geared toward 500 point and 1,000 point games has been nice. Has made it a lot more fun and easy to play those kind of small games. And I think they play very well. One thing which is not really well balanced for small games are the secondary objectives. You're having to pick the exact same secondary objectives for a small game as you do for a large one. But, for instance, just in terms of having units that can perform actions, a much smaller game means fewer units, means it's much harder to spare a unit to perform an action if, say, one person or one player has secondaries that require them to perform several actions, and the other player does not have any secondaries that require them to perform actions. I feel like the game is a lot easier for that other player to play. And the classic example of that, I'd say, is the attrition or grind them down secondary, which gives you victory points for killing more of your opponent's units than you lost each turn. And it really synergizes well with elite armies that don't have a lot of units. So yet again, we have a way, rules that benefit armies that are composed only of a few high point, high toughness models. And the nice thing about that grind them down or attrition is that it does not require any of your units to perform actions. All you have to do to get those points is kill enemy units, which is something that you already want to do in the game anyway. So I do feel like if your army can take that secondary, it's incredibly strong, and it's not well balanced against ones that have you performing actions. And then the objectives that require, or the secondary objectives that require you to perform actions, are also not super well balanced between the different armies, in that a lot of armies have a stratagem that lets you perform an action and still shoot or move with your unit. Well, I guess I'll just say shoot or fight. And it doesn't feel incredibly fair if your army does not have those. But like as orcs, you pretty much have to have like some extra grots or something that you're going to bring in from reserve to specifically to perform actions. So these are like 50 points worth of models that you are going to bring onto the table turn 2 or 3. They're going to perform an action and then get shot off the board by your opponent's army. And it kind of feels like you're just straight up paying 50 points to get some victory points for the end of the game, and the unit doesn't ever really do anything that interesting. Arriving on the table from Deep Strike with some grots and having them perform an action doesn't feel very cinematic, in my opinion. And it's not really fun or exciting. But that's kind of like what you want to be doing to win the game and with these current secondaries, especially where so many of the secondaries are not very viable or don't provide very good reward for your having to perform actions. I would say most of the secondaries that require you to perform actions are terrible, and I would like never pick them. Okay, well, there's 2 coats on the flames. Pretty happy with how they're looking, but time to come in with black, I think, and start to give them more definition. You can really see the brush marks on some of these white flames too, so maybe they even need like a 3rd coat in some cases. Switching to a smaller brush, and let's get our black kind of watered down a bit. And how do I want to hold this? I think like so. This is some very delicate painting now. Hopefully I'll be able to keep it on camera. So I do like the smaller game sizes and the smaller missions, but I do kind of feel like the secondaries are not necessarily well balanced or written for these smaller missions, I guess. So maybe it would be nice to see the secondaries all be able to score 15 points and be able to score 15 points in a nice small game. so that even in a small 500 point game of Warhammer 40k, it would be conceivable to score 100 points no matter which secondaries you picked. I think that would be nice. And then we'd see a lot more variety of secondaries being picked too. And you won't have everybody choosing retrieve Octarius data in every single game, for instance. Because it would have more competition from the other ones. It would be more achievable. And then 9th edition did see the introduction of a smaller board size to go along with these smaller games, smaller point value games. And I thought that was cool. But why, oh why, did they get rid of the 6x4 table size? 6 feet by 4 feet. It seems like the only reason they got rid of 6 foot by 4 foot is so that they could have every table size be a multiple of 22 by 30, which is like their Realm of Battle board size. And that to me is just weird. Why not have your Realms of Battle boards be 2 feet square or whatever? Or 2 feet by 1.5 feet, what have you. That would have been an easier fix in my opinion. And kind of weird that like everybody who had a 6 foot by 4 foot table that they'd specifically made for Warhammer had to now modify it or get new battle mats or create a border for their table. Why make people do that? Just seemed unnecessary. But I do like having the smaller board sizes for the small games. I've right now got a board set up on my table for a 500 point game, or no, 1,000 point game. So the board is, I think, 30 by 44. And yeah, that's fine, it works. It's nice having the action really concentrated down to a small area for a small game. I do think that was a good idea, good design choice. I'm a fan of that addition to the game. Yeah, this is looking pretty good with the black. Let's turn it around. Trying to think of what else was added for 9th edition. I can't think of a whole lot else. I think I've covered most of the main stuff. If you have ideas for what you'd like to see in the next edition of 40k, definitely leave them in the comments on YouTube. This is fun. I kind of like doing freehand, but it is difficult. Requires steady hand and patience. And this is freehand that was supposedly done by orcs, so maybe it doesn't have to be totally perfect. I have my built-in lore explanation for why it's okay for my hand to jitter a bit, as orcs are maybe not the most precise artists either. I am copying how the other guy did his flames, where he had them kind of jagged like lightning bolts like this. I think it's a cool effect. Looted the idea for my looted X-Wing. I'm mostly trying to block the flames out with this fine detail brush, and then I could come back with a bigger brush to paint black around the rest of these armor panels, as long as I get the lines traced. Oops, my brush is starting to get split tip. That's not good. Mostly fix that just by giving your brush a little 360 roll on the paint palette to get it back into a single tip. Pretty necessary to get these nice straight lines and pointed edges. I guess we could talk for a minute about some rules that people have enjoyed in previous editions that went away. I guess I'll say a few things about line of sight in 9th edition. 9th edition saw the return of true line of sight, if I remember right, where basically you would look from a model's eye point of view to see if one model could see another. And then models that can't see the target can't shoot it. I mean, that's kind of been around all the time in Warhammer, but it mostly comes up with models that are like in the second floor of a ruin, and they're trying to shoot down at some models that are outside the ruin or on the ground floor. But you have to kind of look from the model's eye point of view to see if they can actually see them, if they're like tall enough. But for the most part, models that are not on a second floor but are on ground level with each other, so they're on the same kind of horizontal plane, when you're looking to see if those models can see each other or whether one benefits from cover or not, the rules mostly have you drawing a straight line between their bases and simply checking to see if that line passes over a piece of area terrain space. So in situations like that, you're actually drawing a line between the bases of the two models, and so the quote-unquote true line of sight from the sort of eye level of the shooting model isn't so much of a factor, because you're actually looking at the base-to-base line. So although we supposedly have true line of sight in 9th edition, a lot of times you're actually looking at the line of sight between the two models' bases rather than the line of sight of the models themselves. And in some situations I've used house rules to even get around true line of sight. So usually at my house we'll play that if a unit is in a ruin, I've built my ruin so that they have windows on all sides, and then we can just assume that any models inside can see out those windows and be seen through those windows. And it saves us some time of crouching down at the edge of the table and trying to peer from the perspective of the models. And I feel like that was something that they intentionally helped us get rid of in 8th edition. In terms of simplifying the game and removing arguments, one of the arguments that people would get into is, can this model see this other model? And when it was questionable, you'd have both players stooping over, bending over next to the table, and trying to look from the model's eye point of view. And then oftentimes they still wouldn't agree with each other as to whether or not one model could see another. And you'd have issues where, like, okay, they can see the sword or the gun barrel of this other model, but is that really a fair definition of being able to see it? And I feel like the rules now say, yes, you count a sword or a gun barrel or whatever, even maybe like a antenna or a flag or something. And I don't know if I like that, but the idea of bringing back true line of sight, I feel like there was no real need for it. I think that what they've been doing, where you actually look base to base and it's more about does the line pass over a piece of terrain or not, I think that makes for an easier to play game that's more streamlined and simple and has fewer arguments. And so that's why we've got the house rule at my house, where units can see out of and be seen in ruins. And I feel like it makes the game easier to play, fewer arguments, and the players get to look more dignified since they don't have to crouch over and shut one eye and try to look from the point of view of the models. I think that kind of thing should be removed from the game as much as possible. And yet there is a situation that happens in the game where you do have models being killed out of line of sight nevertheless, regardless of this. So in the current rules, you basically shoot weapons one at a time in terms of rolling the dice, but you declare the shots all at once. So say you've got a squad of 10 models and only one can be seen, and I'm shooting at that squad with my squad of models, so I have 10 guys all shooting different kinds of weapons. And say my first shot kills that one guy I can see, I do get to continue shooting with the whole squad, according to 9th edition rules. The whole squad that cannot see the surviving members of your squad, and yet all my guys can shoot and kill those guys they can't see, as long as I was able to see one member of the squad at the start of my shooting. So that kind of goes against the sort of true line of sight philosophy, in my opinion. And what it does is it prevents players removing that one model who can be seen as the first casualty and then being safe from all further shooting. But I don't really know why we needed to have all the models be able to be shot. If you're kind of trying to make a game with true line of sight where you can hide models out of sight and then they can't be shot, it doesn't make a lot of sense that then you allow them to be shot simply because one model was visible. So that's a little weird. I don't know exactly why they needed to do that, and I would maybe like to see it changed in the future to where we forget about this whole true line of sight thing and it's everything is straight line, base to base. Does it pass across terrain or not? But or models that can't be seen can never be killed. That was a nice, easy to remember rule that we've had in the past. But what do you think about true line of sight, and should it be changed, or is it working well how it is? Be curious to hear some other people's opinions on that. And what do you think of my house rule that model in a ruin can see out and be seen, so that the players don't have to be stooping and peering and trying to look from a model's eye point of view, from a model standing 6 inches away from the ruin up to a second floor. And then you don't have to worry so much about the exact height of every model. I've been hearing players say that, oh, well, I went to a tournament and I had some old-fashioned Sisters of Battle, and the tournament organizer told me these models are like a few millimeters too short because the new Sisters of Battle models that have come out are a little bit taller because of scale creep. So now your old-fashioned models are no longer tournament legal because they're just a few millimeters shorter than the new versions of the same models. That seems like unnecessary complication to me. And I like to have old models be tournament legal without having to make too many changes. Although we do have new base sizes for a lot of models, and I'm fine with that. I've already rebased all my models to whatever's current, so it's not like I'm totally against having to make any changes to models for game balance. And I do like the bigger models for the most part. 32 millimeter bases, I think that's what they're called, have been improved the look of my miniatures, in my opinion. Okay, there we go. I've touched up those black flames with a little more, or white flames with a little black paint. I'll just kind of blend that out into the back of the wing a little bit with some water. And do I need to do that on the wings underneath? I think I do, but we'll try to make it quick. Thank you to whoever told me in my last stream that my stream was showing up as uncategorized. I had set up my streams on a stream schedule in Twitch to be basically every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at 7 p.m. And when I was doing that, I went ahead and plugged in a category for my streams of Warhammer and a title for each of my streams as Painting Warhammer Miniatures. But apparently my streams were showing up with no title and no category. And since then I figured out that basically Twitch doesn't automatically know that I'm starting my scheduled stream when I start to stream 10 minutes before my scheduled stream is about to begin. And so I looked on OBS Studio and figured out how to put in titles and categories. So hopefully this is my first one that actually is properly categorized as Warhammer. And I put a title of something like Painting an Orc X-Wing Dacajet. So thank you for that. Trying to constantly improve the quality of my stream and the channel. And in keeping with that, one of the things I was doing today, right before the stream, hey, we got a new follower. Welcome. Mini Scribbler, great to have you in the channel. Been talking about 9th edition, giving it kind of my review now that I've played probably about 30 games. And just talking about ways that I want to improve the channel. And I'm definitely excited to try to get battle reports on the channel soon. I've got some local players here in Portland, Oregon who are excited to stream games of 40K on Twitch and posted to YouTube. So today before the stream, I was downstairs working on my setup for live streaming 40K games. I've got the table set up for a 1,000 point game that unfortunately got canceled on Tuesday. Mini Scribbler, hey, I don't actually play, I'm just a painter. Well, hey, you're super welcome here. I've been doing painting streams for about 4 weeks now. I guess this is the 4th week, and it's Orc Week this time around. So I'm painting a X-Wing looted Dacajet for my orcs. Are you doing some hobby painting yourself tonight? It was pretty successful setting up the cameras for the live stream downstairs. I was using my laptop, which has a built-in camera, and then I had 2 other cameras plugged into it so I could have like a wide angle showing the players around the table and a dice cam at the same time that I have my main camera pointed down at the table to show the models in the action. Might paint later, you don't know yet. And you painted your first orc bust the other day. Ooh, cool. Do you have an Instagram where you share your painted models, Scribbler? Or maybe I already follow you on there. I've started following a lot of a lot of Instagram painters with my Challenger Tabletop Instagram, which is where I've been posting these. And is it the same Instagram? Is it Mini Scribbler, at Mini Scribbler? Hopefully I'm saying that right. Doing some sort of delicate freehand here, so I might be occasionally holding my breath to try to keep my hands steady. Yes, same name. I think I might follow you already, but if not, I will definitely add you. It's been such a great community to join there. I've been posting 40K miniatures and stuff on my personal Instagram for several years, which was at Ninja Wolf Hybrid. but I've pretty much transitioned now to just posting like cooking and stuff on that and doing all my miniatures on my Challenger tabletop account. And since then I've been, partly trying to grow the account by following a lot of people and, kind of participating in the wider community, and it's been really fun and rewarding. It's really cool how many people get into conversations and follow each other and post stories. And oh yeah, I'm pretty sure I do follow you. It's really fun seeing all the stuff that people do there, and great inspiration too. Yeah, most people are very supportive. That's sure true. Trying to think of who some of the cool ones I've really felt a lot of support from. Certainly Dark Elf Aaron and Turbidius. And I really like Figuratively Speaking Minis, I think. She posts like a lot of stories where she's talking to the camera, and it's always like wishing you a good day today and that kind of stuff. It's just a nice little boost to have someone wishing you a good day on video, even if it's sort of generic to everybody. And I want to do more of that myself, so I'm making an effort to post more little short videos of myself to wish people a good day and say hello. I do think sometimes that's more engaging for people as opposed to just sort of faceless pictures of miniatures. Although it's certainly a lot of fun seeing all the miniatures too. Well, might need to come in with some white and do a little touch up from the opposite direction on those. But hopefully you can see how the flames are starting to come out. Lightning flames. Have you seen the orc jet that I stole this idea from on Instagram? I think that's where I saw it. Maybe I'll take a break to paint the base here. Gonna be doing kind of a mix of red and brown on the base where I already have some red sand to just kind of blend the sand and the base together a bit. And then after the stream, I'll probably glue some static grass down to that. How's your day going? What have you been up to, Scribbler? Says, nope, he hasn't seen the original. I think the original one was maybe a Blitzer bomber or a Dakajet. I can't remember. First thing I did today was run to the store to pick up some super glue because I was running out and I wanted to be able to glue stuff to this base in particular. Not much today. It's very hot, so just chilling inside today. You must be in Australia is my guess. It's very cold here in Oregon. We've got snow and ice the last few days. My roommate asked me if I could come pick him up at his work at like 2 a.m. Yes, he is in Australia. All right, good guess. My roommate asked if I could come pick him up, and I looked at the temperature. It was like 27 degrees, and I was like, oh, 35 today here in Celsius. Yeah, so I'm talking Fahrenheit, where it's below freezing here, or it was last night when he called me or texted me. So I said, if I slide off the road and get in a car accident, that would be bad, but it also would mean I wouldn't actually make it there to pick you up. So you're probably better off just walking your bike. I think he's about a 15-minute bike ride away from the condo. It's been cool getting to know some Australians. Let's see. Turbidius lives in Australia, I think on the East Coast, if I remember. And the other night, a couple teenage kids who were just getting into Warhammer or Games Workshop games for the first time were doing a live video. And I tuned into that, and it was just me and one other person watching. But what a surprise, the other guy who was watching was also here in Portland, Oregon. So 20-30 minutes later, the two of us had, friended each other and had a game lined up. You're on the southeast coast, live on the beach. It's nice. That does sound nice. I would love to go to Australia. It's on my bucket list, or rather, on my bucket list is to see a wild cassowary. Do you know what those are? You probably do. Cassowary is like a large flightless bird that lives in northern Australia in the jungle, as I understand it, and they're somewhat dangerous. Like, I think the last time a cassowary killed a person was probably over 100 years ago, as far as I've heard, when one of them like disemboweled some teenage kid with its claws. So they're kind of like a modern day velociraptor is how I kind of picture them, although I think they're closer to like an ostrich. They just seem very cool. Yep, you know them. All right. The other things I would love to do is travel to Antarctica. I read a book about Antarctica, which is pretty much my... And you have never seen one in real life. All right. Maybe you ought to take advantage of the fact that they live in your home country and go track one down. Although I imagine it's very hard to find one in the wild, I would think. So I'd love to go to Antarctica. I read a book called The Loneliest Continent, which is really my favorite nonfiction book. And it's about the exploration of Antarctica. Not traveling anytime soon with COVID. Yeah, the big news from Australia with COVID is that people have like traveled out of the country, and then when they've come back to Australia, they've been put in some kind of detention camp, living in tents or something, or like what do you call that? Prefab housing or something. And people are having to spend weeks in these sort of internment camps because they traveled out of the country. Is that something you're following? Not really a COVID stream, but hard to avoid it as a topic. It just we're all living through it right now. Tried to be as safe as I can, but hey, Angerous Angel, welcome to the stream. I was hanging out in his stream earlier, liking the looted X-Wing. Let's zoom out a little bit if we can. I guess maybe we're already zoomed out. There you can see how it's coming along. Got the lightning flames going on the wings, and these other white panels are going to get some checkerboard pattern. And the nose is probably just going to stay white. That's the plan. Good to see you, Angel. And we've been chatting with Scribbler, who's in Australia, Southeast Australia. Must mean you're kind of close to Sydney, right? Isn't that in the southeast? Scribbler? And Angel, how's your night going? What have you been up to since your stream ended? Did you get something to eat? I still actually haven't had dinner. I have my coffee as usual here. Although it's cold now. And I scarfed down a couple of, what are they called? Fig Newtons before the stream. Do you guys have those in Australia? You did? You also took your nighttime meds. All right, you're probably kind of zonked out now then. Fig Newtons, if you haven't had them before, they're kind of like a soft cookie with a fig filling. And if you just need a quick bite to eat that contains some protein and tastes like a cookie, they're not bad. Some people don't like them, but I think they're pretty good. I actually thought I had COVID again a couple weeks ago, although I tested negative. I think it's possible to, they say it's possible to get a false negative on your test. And I think what happened is I had COVID about, end of October, beginning of November. And so I think my body had built up an immunity. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, I noticed after, I guess that my taste came back after about a month. Then about 2 weeks after that, I felt like I came down with a mild cold. Oh yeah, that'll knock you out, Angel. Felt like I had a mild cold and like I was starting to lose taste again. And so I think what actually happened is I had a mild infection of COVID, but I was testing negative on all my tests. So hard to say. Sounds like that's a thing that can happen, and you can actually maybe even give it to other people while at the same time you're mostly immune yourself and testing negative. I think that's part of why it's so hard to really stop. Well, I think what I'm going to go for next is a little more white, where I have these kind of white armor plates. Walking pneumonia stinks. Yeah, I'm glad you got tested for COVID. I was working outside in the rain all day doing my construction job, installing gutters, Wednesday of last week, and I think I did come down with a cold the next few days, and over the weekend I did get a COVID test just to be safe. But yep, had a little bit of a mild runny nose and just like a little bit of a cough. So it's enough to make you worried that it could be something serious, but probably just a cold, and I should be able to get my results of my PCR test any day now. I have to remember to go online and sign up for that. Angel, yeah, I've been tested twice in the last 3 weeks that you've had it. That's good. Thanks for doing your part. You said you work at a grocery store, so important to keep people safe. I appreciate all the people who take extra precaution. I don't think it's the same thing as panicking. Just trying to do your part and be safe and watch out for other people. Yeah, that's what you said. Both have been negative. That's good. And I hope you're safe at your grocery store. Hopefully your customers are doing their part to protect you also, and hopefully you have some of those clear plastic sheets installed to protect you too from having people straight up breathe on you. They put those in at my hotel, which is my other job, so that does help. Although I have to go in and basically on my overnight shifts at the hotel, I set up the breakfast for the next morning for the guests, so that's one place where I'm potentially exposed to a lot of surfaces that people have touched. I'm trying to be very diligent about cleaning all those surfaces every time I have an overnight shift, so I can not just protect myself from the guests, but also protect the guests from each other. No, not the shoppers in North Carolina. Oh, sorry to hear that. Some places where people kind of pride themselves on being tough and not being scared, that translates to not taking precautions, which is sort of unfortunate. Looking at you, Texas. We always had people come into our hotel from Texas saying, "Oh yeah, nobody's wearing masks in Texas. We're over that." It's like, all right. Is that how it works? So, Angerous Angel is a, yeah, the virus doesn't care if you're scared or not. Yeah. I think it's funny when people say, "Oh, everybody's scared." It's like, well, no, they're not. Say how you feel. Don't really say how other people feel, because you're probably not correct. The one I'm always seeing is I used to work at Starbucks, and people would say, "Oh, everybody's angry about the Starbucks red cups. It's a big controversy." And I'm like, well, yeah, I keep hearing everybody's angry, but I've never literally heard someone say I'm angry. I think it's more like everyone just likes to make a big deal about it, and it's kind of funny. People like to get outraged that other people are outraged, so I think they're kind of like more prone to blow other people's reactions out of perspective. Like here's a 40K example. Was I saw somebody today say his entire Facebook feed is all people panicking about the Tau railgun. And I'm thinking, well, I'm someone who's complained about it. I didn't make a post about it, but I complained about it on a couple other people's posts, but I wouldn't say I'm panicking. Hell, I'm looking forward to playing my first game against a Tau railgun to see how it is. But I'm still welcome to have an opinion, aren't I? And if you've got a Facebook group with 20,000 people in it and 1/4 of them want to give their opinion, some people want to interpret that as panic, which, you know, I kind of get it, but I don't think it is. Well, I think this nose on here just needs another coat of white, and then we're probably ready to start painting checkerboard once the white's dry. Here I'm suffering from my white paint being kind of chunky and having a little bit of grit in it. I don't like that. You guys have that problem with your white scar paint where it's not very smooth as a paint goes? Trying my best to get all the grit off with my brush. But yep, we're getting there. Wonder if I want to do anything else on this pilot. Oh, Angerous Angel says, actually scared a non-mask wearer at work. I grabbed 2 gloves from the box, put one on, and held the other. The shopper was like, whoa, why are you unwearing one glove? That's not safe. I replied, so is not being vaccinated or not wearing a mask, there's no difference? Then I put the other glove on and served them. That's funny. I was at a little corner store here, like a convenience store, and the gentleman in front of me was an older guy, maybe 65, 70 years old, and I wasn't really looking at the cashier, but the person in front of me said, would you mind covering your nose with your mask? Like he felt like the guy's mask was not being worn properly. And the guy replied, it is covering my nose. And I just thought, whoa, what a weird kind of exchange. And kind of like passive aggressive from this guy who's thinking that he's going to get COVID from the person who's behind glass serving him at the convenience store. Thought he was maybe overreacting a bit, being a little rude, but yeah, I'm sure he's worried. I have a coworker who was worried that I came to work with sniffles the other day, and he lives with his elderly mother, so I can understand, you know, feeling like if he gets COVID, it could be a death sentence for his mother. Then it's worth being a little rude now and then, or raising an issue if you feel like your coworker's not keeping you safe. But I did get tested and I was negative there. Never had issues with white scar, really. The old ceramite white had major issues, but I tend to use Corax white these days. My favorite white is Pallid Witch Flesh, although it's definitely an off-white. Let's see. Oh yeah, I had a little bit of touch-up to do on the pilot. Let's do that real quick. I might have to step away from a minute to use the restroom. Sorry about that. One of the problems of drinking coffee all day. So I will be back in just a second. I'm going to put the miniature on the spinner back up for a second. And I will be back. Alright, sorry for the interruption. We're back. Going to the painting cam again here. And this X-Wing's starting to look pretty good, huh? I think we do need to do an ink wash on the black areas. And I'm not sure if I really want to do another coat of white on some of these areas too. I think maybe I should. Hey, we got a few more comments too. Angel says, I need a turntable like that one. I love my little miniature spinner. I ordered it on Amazon. And I don't remember exactly what it's called. Let's see if it has a product name on the bottom here. Nope. Yeah, you almost can't tell anything about it just by looking at it. Except it takes 5-volt power. But yeah, I've been getting a lot of use out of that. There we go, getting much better coverage on the white now with like my 4th layer of white scar. And Angel says, oh my god, can I make a Blood Angels logo now? Yes, wow, that looks pretty awesome. How did you do that? Very cool. Is it because I set the topic to Warhammer for the stream? The wings are my emotes and the blood drop is a friend's. Oh, cool. Very neat. So yeah, I was going to say Angel's a Blood Angels player, although do you play a Blood Angels successor? I'm trying to remember. And do you still play Sisters of Battle? And then Scribbler, he's more of like a hobby painter. Hasn't played 40k, you said. Really cool to get a few viewers in the stream. Thanks for joining, guys. I think it is time for an ink wash. And do I want to give this pilot some brown pants, maybe? I think I do. Why not? Gonna use some XV88 brown and just gonna dab a little paint on his pants here, which will give him a little more detail to be seen through the cockpit canopy, which is gonna kind of obscure a lot of the detail on him. Looks like I hit both his pants and his seatbelt harness, but that's all right. You won't really be able to see too much of what it is down here through the cockpit glass. Let's put that in place just for a second, just kind of see how he's looking. Yeah, very cool. It's gonna look great. Angel says, mainly Blood Angels, although I do have a combat patrol of Flesh Tears. That's the one. And yes, I play Sisters too. Very cool. I've got probably the first or second battle report we have on stream is going to be with Sisters of Battle versus my orcs. Maybe I'll have this Dakajet in that game. We're going to be doing 1,000 point games to start. And if we can finish those in like a 3 or 4 hour stream, then we might look at upping the point value to 2,000. That would be probably the goal eventually, is to have 2,000 point battle reports. Alright, looking for my Nuln oil now. Gonna start to apply some shade to this model. And I'm gonna try and stay off of the areas that I painted white with this. So really just trying to darken up the blacks and back off the silver a bit. Like so, and I'm very heavy-handed with my washes, like Angel is. I noticed you said you do the same thing. You use your washes like all over the model to give it kind of like a dirty look. That's what I'm going for here. Whoops. Oh, got it all over the white panel. Oops. Just gonna wipe that with my finger a bit. There we go. It's okay if it looks a little dirty. I am planning to add a wash to the white panels later, but just like a little bit of Seraphim sepia. And I also want to use this on the areas that are like bronze or brassy. And on the last model, I did a highlight on the brass with a different color, which I haven't done yet, so I might do that actually as a dry brush after hitting it with a wash. Not too worried about the underside of the model. People are pretty much never going to see it, but and I don't want the wash to drip down the flying stem, but we'll put a little bit. Have you guys seen the new Dune movie? Looks pretty good. Angel says, I use washes shades as layers, adds a thin contrast. I use contrast paints for deep contrast. Oh, okay, cool. Oh, well, I should also ask your opinion on today's topic, Angel, which is 9th edition 40K. It's been out for quite a while now, and it added some real complexity to the game compared to 8th edition. It added secondary objectives and terrain keywords. So I was just kind of giving my opinion on those. Overall, I felt like I was not a fan of terrain keywords or armies of renown, but I felt like secondary objectives were cool and it added some nice complexity. I just had a few critiques, like I feel like all secondaries should have a maximum score of 15 points possible. Just give us some more like ways to add a couple extra points so that each one could max out. And I felt like the new smaller board sizes and smaller game sizes are cool and add some new fun options for smaller games, but that the secondaries are not necessarily balanced toward those smaller games. So like having to have a unit to perform an action 4 times is a lot easier in a 2,000 point game where you can easily afford to have kind of a throwaway unit compared to like a 500 point game where it's a lot bigger of a sacrifice to have units performing actions 4 times during the game. So curious to hear your thoughts, and do you love 9th edition? Do you feel like 8th edition was better or better written? Do you feel like the game is just getting continuously improved? Be curious to get some more opinions. And of course, if anyone's watching this after the fact on YouTube, give us your opinions of 9th edition in the comments below. Be fun to get that conversation going. I do enjoy playing 9th edition. I don't think I would go back to 8th, even if that was an option. I mean, of course it is. You can always play an older edition of the game. And I guess something I have noticed recently is that there seems to be a somewhat vocal community on Facebook who are playing older editions. Have you noticed that, Angel? I've been seeing there's like a 2nd edition 40K group on Facebook, and I've seen some people posting pictures of models, and I make some comment about the game rules, and they say, oh, well, actually I play 2nd or 3rd edition. And I guess if you play Horus Heresy, I think you mentioned you do, that has kind of like older rules that are more close to 2nd edition, doesn't it? With maybe like glancing hits on vehicles and facing on vehicle weapons and stuff like that. Is that a thing? Oops, I forgot to paint these little nubs on the end of each wingtip. All right, Angel posted some opinion here, saying 9th I feel is 8th edition with some 7th edition aspects. I would agree. I feel like some things that they kind of got rid of from 7th edition have kind of come back in 9th. Angel says, I like how secondary objectives work. As for the terrain keywords, most make sense, but there are some that I don't like. The Imperial Fist chapter tactic of ignoring terrain mean you can see obscured, which makes no sense at all. Well, about that, I've actually been playing against a Imperial Fist player, and the way he described the way his rules work to me at first was he said, I ignore the cover bonus from terrain. So I assumed that meant that, okay, I don't get light cover against you, so I don't get to give +1 to my armor saves. And I assumed it meant I don't get dense against you, meaning you're never going to suffer a -1 to hit against my guys from shooting through a forest, for instance. And he did correct me recently when I sort of explained that his rule that way. He said, well, no, you actually do get dense against me. The only thing you don't get is +1 to your cover, to your armor save from being in light cover. So it sounds like he's saying he actually is affected by dense, and he would be affected by obscuring, I believe, too. So I do not believe that Imperial Fists actually do get to see through obscuring terrain or shoot through dense terrain with no penalty. I think, based on what he said last, that the only terrain that they really get to ignore is the stuff that's giving you +1 to your armor save. So hopefully that's the case, because yeah, Imperial Fist getting to see straight through obscuring terrain that nobody else can see through, that would be pretty huge advantage. And I don't think that's how it's supposed to work. But if you have a friend who plays Imperial Fist and plays it that way, it might be kind of in his advantage to interpret it that way. And if, like me, you just are going off what someone said and they said, I ignore all terrain, then that is how it would kind of sound. But boy, has it been hard to play against this Imperial Fist. People talk about Imperial Fists like they're not a top tier chapter, but he's really built his army around the bolt weapons that they have all these advantages with. And his core is like heavy intercessors with Hellstorm bolt rifles. So this is Mortimer. He's sometimes in my streams, and he his Hellstorm bolt rifles are 30-inch assault weapons with 3 shots at strength 5. So yeah, they don't have armor piercing except during tactical doctrine, which of course is still going to be 2 turns of every game. But the fact that he can move or advance with his troops, and he always gets the 3 shots up to 30 inches, it's really been some devastating firepower. And he combines it with getting like +1 to wound and re-rolling 1s. Angel says, Horus Heresy uses 7th edition rules. I miss Scatter Dice so much. As for Oldhammer 40k, yes, I play it too. With the group I play with, we play 3rd edition. Wow, that's really interesting to me. 3rd edition, I'm trying to remember 3rd edition. So, I seem to remember that the 2nd edition box set, I think, was the one that had the Space Marines in their parade pose with their bolters kind of flat across the front of their chest. Oh, that was Black Templar box set. Okay. So that was the one with Dark Eldar and posable Space Marines, right? That was 2nd edition? Because I remember when that edition came out, and we were all so excited for posable plastic Space Marines. That was like a real high point in the hobby. That was 3rd or 2nd? I thought that was 3rd, but I could be wrong. And I thought maybe second was the Orcs and Space Marines with the kind of really static poses on the Space Marines. Or maybe I'm getting a couple of them confused. There was a period where I went to college and I wasn't as into Warhammer, and I was thinking maybe I was never going to play it again. And that was when I sold all my White Dwarf magazines, which I still regret. Not sure if I'm keeping this model on camera. Trying to. Well, I might be reaching the end with this ink wash. I guess I still have to hit a couple of the gun barrels. Seems like it could be fun to go back and play an old edition of the game. I'm not sure how well I would remember how to play it. Maybe it would be like nothing. Maybe it would be really easy. Kind of hard to remember back to those older editions for me. I do remember glancing hits on vehicles used to be a thing, and like having to roll on a table if you penetrated the armor to see what would happen. I remember when glancing hits were a thing, a couple situations where I had to rely on glancing hits to destroy vehicles. One was a Angel says second edition was Armageddon Blood Angels versus Orcs. Oh, okay. Fourth was Battle from a Crag, Ultramarines versus Nids. Fifth was Black Reach. Okay, that's a very famous box set. People still use a lot of those models. I think I got those Def Coptas from Black Reach today. And seventh was Dark Vengeance, Dark Angels versus Crimson Slaughter. Yeah. Cool. Well, fun to have that retrospective of all those great box sets. Which are your favorites out of those? For me, I certainly love the one that had Dark Eldar. Those plastic Dark Eldar are actually a part of my Dark Drukhari army today. And I actually also have those little forest trees that you had that were kind of like Dr. Seuss trees that were plastic with a really bright green foliage. I have those incorporated onto some of my forest terrain that I use. And in terms of like rules from older editions, some that me and my friends have gotten some fun use out of are the Death World Forests rules from, I think, 8th edition, where you have some kind of like monstrous forest terrain that can cause mortal wounds if you charge too close to it and that kind of thing. Or grapple weed, which will actually move across the battlefield and chase models down and deal mortal wounds to them. Those have been fun to incorporate into our narrative games. Angel says, to this day, 4th edition box is the most expensive because of the crashed Aquila Lander terrain. The terrain itself can sell for 3 to 4 times the worth of the box set as a whole. That's rare. Interesting. I totally remember that crashed Aquila Lander, although doesn't it look a lot like a Valkyrie or Imperial Guard fighter? I kind of thought the Aquila Lander was more like a Star Trek shuttlecraft almost. Well, I think I went a little overboard on some of this ink wash. Let's try to back that off a bit. Spread it out over here, maybe. All right. Can we be done with the ink wash? I hope so. All right, moving on. Let's paint some checkerboard. It's a Forge World model. Yeah, okay. Can't remember if I've actually seen the Aquila Lander model, but I think I looked up its data sheet the other day. I have Genestealer Colts Army, and I've become kind of obsessed with creating Genestealer versions of all this Imperial Guard stuff to use for my Genestealer cult. And so I was getting curious the other day about, are there any cool flyers I should have as part of my Brood Brothers force with my Genestealer cult? And I ended up deciding I really wanted to have a like an attack helicopter as part of my Genestealer cult army. And it was just a matter of deciding which data sheet to use and what model would be appropriate. And I kind of wanted to go with something like a Hind helicopter, the Russian attack helicopter. It's very large and menacing looking and has rocket pods on it. And the data sheet that I decided would be most appropriate for a Hind helicopter was the Vulture gunship. It has rocket pods and missiles as well, both of which were on the Hind model I was looking at. So I decided to order some Hind helicopter models and use them with the Vulture gunship datasheet. And I found a pretty good deal on eBay, but unfortunately the models themselves are coming from China, and I think they're going to take a total of about 3.5 months to arrive from when I ordered them. So I didn't realize that when I placed the order, but once it was confirmed, it had a delivery date that was like March. I ordered them, I think, around the end of November, so maybe that's like 4 or 5 months of sitting on a boat, probably, crossing the Pacific. Whoa, getting some ink wash on my hands. Let's try to wipe that off. And hopefully we're not getting any dripping down the flying stem. I think we're okay. But nevertheless, I am excited for those to arrive and have a couple flyers in my Genestealer cults army. I think there's really not a lot of good flyers for Genestealer cults. You pretty much have to go into Astra Militarum for Brood Brothers flyer. I don't think Genestealer cults even have one flyer as part of their codex. Do you think I picked the right one going for a Vulture gunship? And what do you think of my decision to have a helicopter on the battlefields of the 41st millennium? Is it a little bit too much of a anachronistic modern day vehicle? Or is it kind of appropriate for Genestealer cults who have like dump trucks and stuff? At least mine do. I use some proxy models that are dump trucks for some of my Goliath trucks. Again, hopefully players don't mind too much. They do seem like one of the factions that makes the most use of like industrial mining equipment and potentially even like civilian vehicles and equipment. And I've been having a lot of fun with my Genestealer cults with some proxy models for the vehicles. Hey, we got someone new. New chat from Sized. It's a hard to pronounce name when you first look at it. Welcome to the stream, Sized. Great to have you here. I'm Christopher. This is Challenger Tabletop, and today we've been painting an Orc DACA jet based off of a looted X-Wing. And I'm getting toward the end of it, and our discussion topic for today has been 9th edition 40K and opinions, and giving it kind of a review now that it's been out for a good long time. Do you play 40K Sized, and am I saying your name right? The conversation looks awesome, or the conversion? I bet you meant conversion. Or maybe you did mean the conversation. We're getting kind of a little off topic, as I was talking about some like counts as models I was going to use as proxies for my Genestealer cults. Are you doing some hobby stuff tonight? Uh, Angerous Angel was doing some painting earlier today, painting some Nurgle demons I saw. They're looking great, by the way. Sized? Awesome. You will use it as a fun item or on table with some house rules. The conversation looks awesome. Not playing a thing now. Played Warhammer Fantasy 5th long ago and War Machine. Now I really getting interested in Battletech. Well, Sized, I heard something amazing today from Angerous Angel when I was in his stream. He said, I think it was him who told me that Warhammer Fantasy is kind of coming back. I could not believe it, as I actually played Warhammer Fantasy 2 back in the day, and I was pretty bummed out when it got discontinued, and I have not played Age of Sigmar, which replaced it, partly because of kind of the bad taste it left in my mouth when Fantasy was discontinued. Well, Angerous Angel said that we're going to get a new Games Workshop Warhammer Fantasy game called Old World. And it's going to be the return of square bases. And it's going to be set like 1,000 years before Warhammer Fantasy, but in the same world. That's just kind of my guess, about 1,000 years before from what you were saying. And it actually sounds like we might be able to use our old Warhammer Fantasy models in the game if we still have them, which I do. They're just sitting right in my closet downstairs. So that was very exciting. I have Dark Elves, Dwarves, Bretonnians, and a Goblin army that my brother bought for me on eBay back when he was an eBay reseller. In college, and around the year like 2005, my brother was buying and selling Warhammer and Warhammer 40k models on eBay before that was like such a big thing. He would buy big lots of like 300 models, and then he would break them up and sell them individually, listed for as what they really were, for a pretty good profit, I think. And so he was able to pick me up on a Goblin army, just kind of in the process of doing that. That was very nice of him, and we played 1 or 2 games, and he told me recently that he still remembers like some rule he got wrong and always felt guilty about having made extra attacks against me or something in a combat phase. Let's see. Got some more chat. Size says, nah, I am sorry, but Games Workshop is getting unreal with prices. That's true. I'm buying a lot of my stuff on eBay now. Angel says, in a way it is. They're doing a historic setting, so yeah, it's not exactly going to be Warhammer Fantasy Returned. And that it's still cheaper than Magic the Gathering. Yeah, maybe. I played that too. I've got probably 6 binders of Magic the Gathering here in my room. And I don't play it too much anymore, but it's nice to always have that as an option, something to pull out. I like the EDH rules, personally. Or else I just play what they call Legacy or Casual. Size says, especially with me, I'm from Hungary, now in Bangkok, Thailand. Import taxes kills me with fees and delivery fee. Yeah, I bet also in Australia, I bet Warhammer is crazy expensive from what I hear. We had an Australian in chat a little earlier. And I see a lot of Australians on Instagram now who are into the Games Workshop games. I've been to Southeast Asia one time, to Penang, Malaysia. That was really fun. Rented a scooter and rode around the island. I rode motorcycle here in the United States for a while, so made me confident enough to try that, but the people at the hotel warned me that too many foreigners die on scooters, so they wouldn't actually rent one for me. They said all they'd do is call me a cab that could take me to someplace I could rent one, and then it's on me. Thought that was pretty funny. Size says, I played Dark Elves in Warhammer Fantasy. That's cool. So that's 2 of us. I played Dark Elves too. They were my main. They're a lot of fun. I actually painted up my army right around the time that, or I finished painting it up right around the time they canceled the game. Angel says, but yeah, it's an investment for sure. Size says, also I go crazy with everything Shadowrun. That's cool. I have a friend who, sort of former friend, who got me into Shadowrun. And we played some of the video games together. That was cool. I did have a good time with that. I had a orc character named Mr. X, who was kind of cool. Angel says he hasn't played Shadowrun in ages, probably since 2002. Size, the 3 PC games, RPGs are quite good, but they changed the rules from the pen and paper RPGs. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Okay, the most recent one I played was Shadowrun Lockdown. You probably played that one too if you love everything Shadowrun. I thought it was pretty fun. Kind of an interesting setup there where you'd be sharing the world with other players in multiplayer, but at the same time you'd be kind of all progressing through the story at your own pace. You'd kind of advance to different home areas where you'd interact with higher level players. I also played one time as a kid, I played Cyberpunk 2020. Kind of an old pen and paper Shadowrun style RPG, and I got as far as making a character, and my friend was running the game and I was like playing solo, and on my way to my first mission I heard some gunfire and I stopped my vehicle and got out to investigate. Got kind of drawn into a gunfight I had nothing to do with, and got randomly shot in the head and killed in my first 10 minutes of playing the game. And I was like, okay, never playing that again. I probably should have given it another chance. Seemed like a fun game setting. I also played some of the White Wolf RPGs a little bit. Like in college, I played Werewolf a few times. That was fun. My feel-bad moment in that was when I was playing kind of a Street Fighter. I'd just seen the movie Snatch starring Brad Pitt, where he's like a bare-knuckle boxer. So I made a werewolf character who was a bare-knuckle boxer, and I got into some street fight kind of in between adventures where I had some bad luck and ended up being like slammed in a dumpster with a dumpster lid, and suffered like permanent damage to my character where he's gonna like have some wounds that would never heal. That really bummed me out. Not fun in a RPG to get permanent injuries that reduce your character's combat effectiveness. And I kind of carried that into my narrative campaigns for Warhammer 40k, where try not to let any player accumulate disadvantages, because it I think discourages players from continuing the campaign. So we actually play narrative campaigns of Warhammer 40k with the match play rules. I know they've got the Crusade rules now for narrative campaigns, but I don't feel like those are necessary. I like match play because it just feels like the most fair game of 40k you can play. So we play match play, but we just spend some time talking about the campaign setting and figuring out like some stakes for the battle before we play it for the narrative world. Angel says, I'm gonna head out. It's 1 a.m. for me. Take care. Thanks. Really appreciate you stopping in the stream, Angel. Great to see you again. Look forward to seeing your stream again. Good to have you as a friend. Anytime. All right. And thanks for checking out my project with the Orc Dakajet. Hey, we got Sized as a new follower. Thanks, Sized. Really appreciate the support. You get to have your name on screen for probably a while now. Yeah, I'm having fun with this Dakajet. My idea came from the fact that the Orc Dakajet has 4 guns, 4 super shooters, and of course the X-Wing famously has 4 guns. So I thought, oh, that's a conversion made in heaven. And then I started looking online and I found this Revell Miniatures model on eBay that was just about the right size. It's maybe 8 or 9 inches long, so it's maybe either about just the same size as a Dakajet or maybe a little bit longer, maybe an inch or 2 longer, but close enough to where I think most people would not mind having it as a proxy. And the main change I had to make was to replace the little laser cannons on the wingtips with like machine guns, basically, or machine gun barrels, which I had some extras from the Orc Dakajet kit. I made mine into a Burnabama, so I had some extra gun barrels, but not enough, so I did order some extra gun barrels off eBay as well. That's been a great way for me to pick up some secondhand models at some discounts as well, but the prices does add up. I definitely need to take a little break from buying secondhand models for a month or 2. I've got plenty sitting on my table waiting to paint for live streams, so I'm not going to run out anytime soon. And mostly I'm trying to just paint on live stream now, as I'm live streaming Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So that gives me quite a bit of painting time. And usually I can batch paint maybe like 2 or 3 models or a big vehicle each time I live stream. So I do think I'm going to get through my pile of shame here in fairly short order. Might have to do some cleanup there. Yep, got a little bit out of the lines, but not too bad. How many do we have left? Looks like just 2 more armor panels. Gonna get checkerboard. Kind of fun for me to do this part. It's tedious and it's freehand, but it's also like pretty much about the last thing we need to do on the model, so I feel like we're on the homeward stretch. But unfortunately my small layer brush here is also getting a little bit of split tip issues, so that's making this harder. I'm not the best at treating my brushes really nicely. Sized, I think you said you were like more of a hobby painter, so I bet you are very nice and kind to your brushes. Or do you mistreat them like I do? I kind of have a survival of the fittest approach to my brushes, where I am just incredibly hard on all of them and then I see which ones can take it. And I just get new ones every once in a while, but I have found that this layer small and the base small and this pagoda number 4 have lasted me a long time. Sai says, I took care of them. Paintings were drying up on me all the time. Have you started using a wet palette? I've definitely seen some people recommending a wet palette to me, including my old roommate. I had a roommate, Garrett, who played 40K, and he, I think, hadn't played in a while when he moved in, and since I played, he got back into it and painted a Tau army, a Tyranid army, and some Blood Angels. And he was a great, fun opponent, and it was just really awesome having a roommate who was into 40k. My current roommate is like a 20-year-old kid who's not so into games anymore. He said he was interested in starting to learn Dungeons and Dragons. So maybe we'll do some role-playing in the future. Size says, I was using older GW paintings, also some Privateer Press ones. Probably mean paintbrushes. This is a Citadel brush, layer small. It's been working pretty well for me for detail stuff. I am using this paint a little thick just because I want it to cover nicely in one coat without having to come back and retrace every single one of these little boxes. Looks like all we need is one more row. Trying to remember where Size said he was from. Did you say, oh, you're from Hungary and now you're in Bangkok, Thailand? All right, that's cool. I used to have another channel on YouTube that was a game channel, and I actually had a viewer from Hungary. I saw in my analytics, and that was cool. And I have been to Austria and Prague, but that's about as close to Hungary as I've come. I've been to Europe a few times. I got to spend a summer in Italy one time, and I have a brother who lives in London in England, who I visited a few times, so that's been fun. Love to go to Europe. It's a really wonderful place with great people for the most part. All right, we are on the last checkerboard armor patch. These are places where I imagine the vehicle has been hit with some weapons and had holes knocked in the wings, and the orcs had to come along and put on an armor patch over the hole. And just to make it look cool, they like to paint some what do you call that, checkerboard on it. And I think this whole thing of goth orcs, which is like orc way of saying goth, like G-O-T-H, goes back to the sort of the British music scene in the 80s when you had goth fashion becoming popular and people wearing all black. And then I think you had some of the bands kind of incorporating checkerboard into their like album designs and stuff. I think that's the origin of this kind of design on the orcs. And I assume that goth goes back to the actual word itself goes all the way back to the Goth barbarians, like the Visigoths and the Goths who attacked the Roman Empire, right? Is that Goths? Did they wear black? I don't think so. So I wonder how did the word goth come to be associated with people who wear black and like a fashion trend? That would be interesting to find out. I did see kind of a fun video on YouTube not long ago that had interviews with kids on the street from back in the 80s who were into punk music and dressing in black and The Cure. And it was kind of breaking down the different styles of dress that the different kids would have and what the different kind of groups and cliques were within the kind of street popular music community of that day. and kind of fun to see like people of your parents' generation back when they were teenagers and they were rebelling against the culture of the time. My parents were actually what you call beatniks. They traveled to Europe and were into literature and poetry and wearing like black turtleneck sweaters and that kind of stuff. This is what they told me. And my mom's nickname the whole time I was growing up was Nikki, and it actually was short for like beatnik. Nikki, like as in beat Nikki, which is kind of weird, kind of funny. You don't really hear too much about the beatniks anymore here in America. You only really hear about the hippies, who were kind of like a different kind of subculture group from the beatniks. Hippies were more into living on communes and stuff, and the beatniks were more into going to like bookstores and coffee shops, is my impression. Well, hey, we are just about done with this thing. I want to add a little bit of wash to the white areas, but it's just going to be a very subtle, what do you call it, Seraphim sepia wash. And I want to give the white as much time to dry before we do that. So as something to do in the meantime, I'm thinking that, let's give the orc his teeth. Something I forgot. So I'm going to keep the same detail brush for this because it's pretty small detail work. And I want the paint nice and thick so I can just kind of dab it on there. And this is going to be real careful detail work. So pardon me while I hold my breath for a second. Couple more teeth to do, and then after this I will do a little bit of dry brush highlight on the brassy sections of the engine. There we go. He's got a lot of teeth. I think I missed one or two there. There we go. All right. So to highlight these brass areas of the engine, I'm going to be using layer paint, brass scorpion layer paint here. And it does need a shake. And I want to get this paint really dry before I apply it, so I'm going to try and squeeze all the water out of this brush. And we'll use my Pagoda number 4 brush. Talk about mistreating my brush. I don't know if you guys can see, it's just coated in dried paint. But it still works great for what I need. So I'm going to go ahead and get some of this paint spread out on my palette here, just using my brush holder as a palette. And I'm going to try and dry the paint off the brush as much as I can to get a nice dry brush. And I just want to apply this a little bit to kind of the top of these engine areas to give it kind of the look like light is hitting the top of it and kind of highlighting it a little bit. Yeah, that's about what I want. Trying to keep the effect subtle so you don't really notice it too much. And this will give us something to do while we let that white get nice and dry. Although I guess I did the white before I came back and did the black checkerboard, so it should be pretty much dry by now. But this is something I wanted to make sure and do. Normally I would do this before I did the ink wash, but I just forgot, and it's not too important, the order. We're getting pretty close to finish with this thing. The Dakajet is a really popular orc vehicle right now. Although it's the weakest of the flying orc flyers, it also is the cheapest to bring in terms of points in the game. And generally if you have a variety of options and they all have the same toughness or number of wounds, the cheapest one is going to be the most durable per point spent. And so for that reason, the Dakajet is probably the most durable of the orc shooters, since it's the cheapest. And they all have about the same amount of durability. So running 2 of them should be pretty strong in the game. There we go. It's looking good. Oh, let's maybe do a little bit over here, over here. So I'll have 2 of these X-Wings now that this one's about done, and be very fun to try them out in the game, see how they do. So I think we're on probably our final step on this model, which is going to be to just do a little bit of Seraphim Sepia wash here and there on the armor panels. I think I've decided I don't really care about coming back and doing touch-up. Hey, Mitzi, welcome to the channel. Thank you. I've been having a lot of fun working on this Orc X-Wing Dakajet. You can probably tell I added a few extra bits here and there. The little checkerboard areas are extra armor panels that I cut out and glued on to make it a little more orky. And I stole this kind of lightning white flames idea from another model, and I told the person who painted it, hey, do you mind if I steal that? And they said, go ahead. So went ahead and tried that on this guy myself. And so now we're going to be adding just a little bit of Seraphim Sepia wash to the white areas to try and make them just look a little bit dirty and not quite so white and shiny. I did kind of forget that I was originally planning on painting white along the kind of leading edge of these wings. So I suppose I could always come back and add that later. Welcome to the channel, Mitzi. The topic of conversation today has been 9th edition Warhammer 40k. If you play Warhammer and you want to give your opinion on 9th edition, I'd definitely be interested to hear it. 9th edition introduced like secondary objectives, which added a lot of complexity to the game. That was one of the things I've enjoyed about it. And it also added terrain keywords, which made terrain a bit more complex and interesting. And I'm not a fan of the way that keywords require you to look up multiple rules in multiple places. That's one thing I was not a fan of, but having more complex terrain has been interesting. And what was the other? I guess my biggest complaint about 9th edition is just that the way that the rules are written, it's kind of the language is like overly complex, and sometimes you have to read rules 3 or 4 times to really understand what it's trying to say, and then even then you might have an argument with your opponent about it because it's not even that clear after reading it so many times. And Mitzi, if you're doing some hobby tonight, what are you up to? Or how was your day today? I had the day off, so didn't get up to much. I went to the store and got some super glue. And And I got some models in the mail, which is cool. Some orc Def Coptas that I ordered off of eBay used. Unfortunately, I only played one single game about 20 years ago, but I just started painting again. I might try playing once I get a little army together. That's awesome. Welcome back to the game and welcome back to the hobby. I think one of the cool things about Warhammer 9th edition is that they introduced like smaller point games, like 500 and 1000 point games and special missions for those. So that's been cool. Mitzi says, I'm trimming parts of a Mythic Blight Hauler for my wife that my wife got me for Christmas. Wow. Well, that's cool. You have a wife, and really cool that she got you Warhammer models. Angerous Angel, who was in the chat earlier, when I was in his stream, he was telling me that him and some friends got Warhammer models for someone, and his wife like gave them all dirty looks, and now they're divorced. So yeah, very cool. You have someone who's supportive of you in the hobby. We are really getting close to finished on this guy. I was just adding a little bit of Seraphim Sepia ink wash to the white parts so that they wouldn't look so clean. One of the cool things about this model is that the wings actually go together and then spread out just like in the movies. Ouch is right, yeah. I guess I'll say I did have been talking yesterday and today to like a online dating app match, and she knew about Warhammer, said her brothers used to be super obsessed with it, so, and she's still talking to me, so that's good. Hopefully it goes somewhere, but trying not to get too invested in the results of that. I think I do want to add a little Seraphim Sepia wash to this guy's teeth just to make him look kind of dirty. Although he'll be very hard to see through his little windshield canopy anyway. Oh, and his pants probably deserve a little ink wash. Let's do some Agrax Earthshade, my favorite color of ink wash. And we'll zoom in on this guy too so you can see what I'm doing there. And I like to really slap a lot of ink wash on at once. Or shade paint as they call it now. Get it on his boots too. Alright, so I think that's about all I wanted to do on the pilot. And that's probably about the whole model finished. I suppose one thing I could do is add a little rim of black paint to the base. If I can find it. Here's my black. But we're really at the end of this project. Maybe the last thing will be gluing on the canopy. Or maybe I should wait for the paint to totally dry inside first, so I don't know if there will be any issues with the glass kind of fogging up. Let's zoom back out. Yeah, these have been really fun. It's Orc Week here on the channel. So yesterday I painted the first one of these Daka Jets. I got built 2 of them, and they are made from a Revel Models X-Wing 1/57th scale that just happened to be about the right size for Orc Daka Jet. And the little Orc pilot inside is a Cromlech model. Cromlech makes, they're like a third-party manufacturer who makes models that work for Warhammer without an official Games Workshop license. Alright, there's a little black rim on the base, and I think we can call this done. Let's go ahead and put the, what do you call it, the little canopy on just for fun, so you can see how that's going to look. There we go. I'll zoom in on the canopy so you can see the little orc through the glass. There you can see him. And he can see out the front. I made sure of that. And had fun adding these extra little exhaust pipes and stuff to the front. Hey, thanks, Mitzi says it looks great. I appreciate it. And here you can see the finished model. Let me try and get a good camera angle for you guys. And you can see, oh yeah, lots of stuff to paint coming up in the next few weeks. Mostly Gene Stealer cults and about 50 grats for my orcs. And here is the finished X-Wing. After stream, I'm going to glue some static grass to the base. I'll show you the other one so you can see how that's looking, but hey, I'm really happy with this. Thank you everybody for joining me in the stream. I'm going to be streaming Warhammer painting Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 7 p.m. US Pacific time. And just for fun, let's take a look at the other Orc Dakajet that I finished yesterday. Here is that one. And you can see I have already glued the grass to the base, so it'll be looking kind of like that when I'm finished. And let's show you the model I'm going to be painting tomorrow on stream. It's going to be the famous German 88 artillery cannon. I got this cheap plastic kind of army man toy cannon, and it's going to be a mech gun for my orcs. So here is what that looks like. I have painted one that's finished, but I think it's downstairs. But you can check out what the finished one looks like on my Instagram, which is also Challenger Tabletop. And hopefully I'll see some of you back in the next streams, and y'all have a fantastic night. Thanks for joining me and being awesome. See you later. Hey, thanks for the follow.